Good evening. I'm Christy Boudreau, Chair of the School Committee, and I'm welcoming you all to our fiscal 25 budget hearing for the Hatfield Public Schools. And as we call this meeting to order, I know our agenda reflected that we would start with public comment, which is what we typically do. However, as a budget hearing, it's an opportunity to give some feedback to what you hear, the news tonight. And so it would make more sense if we started with the presentation over the budget, and then we'll have some conversation after if there are questions. This is a hearing, it's a different format than our business meeting, and we'd be happy to take those. So with that, we're just going to jump right into our conversation, and then we'll shift to the regular business meeting, which has a whole separate agenda, targeting around 7:30. So bear with us and welcome. So with that, we'll kick off our budget hearing and go to our first slide. And Dr. Driscoll and I are going to tag team this. Adam Sullivan will chime in as he desires. Just a little bit of background, the budget is something that comes through the school finance subcommittee, and we work on that in collaboration with town finance. We present it to the select board, and we have to take all of that into consideration and understand what the landscape looks like for the whole town fiscally. And so having had those conversations, we bring back a recommendation to the full committee tonight. So what we're recommending, we're proposing a 2.5% increase in town spending to deliver a near level service plan. And the presentation is going to outline the anticipated revenues and how that compares to our prior budgets. We're going to go into explaining some of the cost increases that we are facing, not unlike any other district. Just a heads up, if we completely level serviced, it would be for the total budget 9.2% more year over year, just to level service. Changes in service that are required to offset, given the available revenue, we're going to break that out. Town funding will be a greater percentage of our total budget than it has been historically. Other sources of revenue are down. We're going to detail that. And the overall fiscal 25 budget is $94,719 less than fiscal 24. We also want to make sure that we're sharing with the public at large the broader context that really helps frame what gives the district confidence in its sustainability. And so we're going to do a little bit of a look at enrollment and school choice trends, the enrollment history as compared to current numbers, to briefly look at alternative costs, which are not the same as alternative facts, and academic performance and offerings. And so with that, before we get too far in, we've heard publicly some questions about, well, what did you even do with that money we gave you last year? And this is a really good time to stop and appreciate the massive investment that the town of Hatfield made in the public schools as taxpayers went to the polls and voted through an override of pretty much unprecedented levels, and what that afforded us to do. And so literally picking up the pieces of the presentation a year ago when we were saying, here's what we will do with an investment. We said we would spend more in STEAM and applied arts for Smith Academy. We did that. We said we would invest in marketing. We did that. We said we would invest in a Spanish teacher for HES. And this is the place, much to our dismay, we were tried and could not hire. So we made every effort to put a Spanish teacher in place, and we could not find one to bring on to staff. We said we would invest in chorus and theater, really just getting more performing arts into Smith Academy because we knew we were losing students over performing arts. We did that. We said we would invest in an on-school psychologist at HES and invest in social emotional learning and training for pre-K to 6 teachers. We've done that. And we said we would invest in middle school sports, and we did that. So I think, did everything pan out exactly as we might have hoped when we planned that budget? No, but to the best of our ability, we did all of the things that we said we would do with the additional income. The positive impact from that investment is that we've been able to maintain 2 classes per grade level at HES and 6 specials. We've been able to maintain the middle school model, to continue small class sizes, including 2 core classes per grade level, plus a really rich schedule of electives at Smith Academy. JV sports program at SA stayed, the X blocks and advisory time, which is part of how we help keep our students in district. We have managed to maintain and grow AP and elective class offerings. 5 out of 8 of those would have been cut if we hadn't been able to pass that override and increase our budget. And we would have had a loss of staff. So we talked through some of the stuff that we added. And I would show with data that we see the tides turning in enrollment in our district. So a year ago at this time, we had lost 6 students. That's 23% of grade between 6th and 7th grade. That transition up to Smith Academy was really quite a big turn a year ago. This year, we lost 1 student at that pivotal change. So while we needed to be up in enrollment and we weren't in all areas, we didn't see the loss that we have been seeing. This year's kindergarten had 7 more students than the previous year. And since we've made a policy change about accepting school choice students, we've added 13 students since October 1st. Some of those are local students that moved into the district and some of them are choice. So taking a look at FY25 revenue, we're always primarily funded through town, who also gets state reimbursement through Chapter 70. And so this year's forecast for town budget is $6,122,016. That's up, like we said, 2.5%. That's the equivalent of $149,309. I think I need to get my screen just a little bigger to read some of the small print. Sorry. School choice, we're budgeting $620,000. This is down from $827 in last year's budget. That's a difference of $207,000. FY24, the current year budget, included $647,000, what I refer to as new choice dollars. Those were choice dollars generated the previous year, plus $180,000 from the revolving account. And that's a pretty big piece of this puzzle. So school choice dollars, as those tuitions come in, we have a separate account for those, and those can gain and grow. And as we have more choice students, then we might not need all of that revenue. We can bank that revenue. And in previous years, when we had very healthy school choice enrollment, we didn't need all of those dollars. And so we had a surplus that was running. But we have been spending down that surplus since 2018. This isn't a new thing, and we knew it was going to come to an end. And we really could not go to the town and ask for an override if we didn't also put in all that we had to give. Like, how would you ask for that if you weren't willing to put in your own? And so this last year's budget included the balance of that surplus, which was 180. So when we hit October, we knew we were going to be having some difficult conversations when we came to the spring, and we anticipated that we would be around 620,000, and we're very close to that. And that's not dramatically different than what last year's new school choice dollars are. So it's not a big shift, it's a small shift. It's the difference of that offset. It's the difference of what we had surplus that is making the really big impact. Grants, we're budgeting for $225,000. That's down from $233,000. Not quite apples to apples. We had a few ESSER dollars left for this year, and we're anticipating some additional circuit breaker funding for next. The revolving accounts, we're budgeting $169,153. That's down from $198,000. It's also not quite apples to apples because we have aftercare in this year's budget because that was an added revolving account at last year's town meeting. Our pre-K tuition is projected down $21,500. And aftercare, a little bright spot here, aftercare has shown great stability and could support enrichment services. So this won't come as any surprise to anyone who follows any school news in the district area, broad area. So like every other district, we're seeing significant cost increases year over year. Our new bus contract, which we will need to review and approve in our business meeting, is a 42% increase for the same routes. That's significant. We're not the only district that has gotten hit with that kind of an increase. We only had one bid come in. And so one of the challenges we've discussed in our school finance meeting is what are our options? Most districts at this point, many of them are only getting one bid in. And so if you choose not to take it and go out to bid, there is no guarantee that you will get any bid coming back, or that the same bidder might not come back in higher. And so we have a 42% increase for services we're required to provide. We have a contracted salary increase at 2.6%. We have increased our available educational support professionals in this budget, and that piece we'll spend more time talking about. Our building maintenance contract for HES is an additional $21,000. The costs for our facilities and utilities are up about 3% from last year, but the facilities and utility costs compared to just 3 years ago is a 70% increase. And that's using actuals, not budgets. And so these are costs that we as a district don't have much choice other than to pay. I would add that our solar at Smith Academy is helping keep giant increases at bay. I think we've saved, what, 19,000 since the solar panels went up at Smith Academy. So as bad as the 70% is, it could be worse if it were not for the solar. I think the anticipation was solar would save us money and we would see a savings. We've just seen that as holding ground. So when we talk about the 3%, that's really because of the solar panels coming into play. We've included in this budget a new rotating equipment replacement amount of $54,000. And that's because we have a large percentage of equipment that was all purchased at the same time. It is all past its expected life cycle, I think it's fair to say. And we need to start replacing that. And the plan is, let's replace it on a rolling basis instead of one lump sum, because that means it will always be a little bit of a hit instead of any given year having a whopping big bill. And lastly, I think we're looking in this budget to do better planning. And so there is a line item that is new for food. Well, actually, we're putting in money into food services revolving account to the tune of $25,000. So we expect to see free lunch continue, which is great. But our food costs between food and prep exceed what the free reimbursement would be. I would add that while we're going to manage that within a fairly small offset that we're looking to add in this budget, previous years when families bought lunches, there were free and reduced lunches for those families that needed it, but everybody else paid for lunch. In those windows, we often had an accounting at the end of the year that was unbudgeted, that could be twice what we're putting in. So the free lunches are making a big difference, but we don't have enough families that take advantage of using the free lunch program that it's cost neutral. So instead of getting surprised by it at the end of the year, we're planning for it. So for those of you following along with the graphics, there is a bar that's going to continue to build, and we're going to look at the graph when we get to the end. So you kind of see apples to apples 24 compared to 25. And you can see roughly that little box there is cost increase and what it. I want to say that we've done a different job this year in school finance than we have ever done before. And my hat is off to Dr. Driscoll and Riley, who have worked tirelessly to rebuild our budget from scratch and add in actuals. And what that has allowed us to do is just really ruthlessly look for where we might have any extra cost, particularly in non-staff kind of costs, right? Any sort of expenses where we can cut back. so that if we were going to have to make hard choices, we knew we did it with a scalpel as best we could. There were 72 line item cuts included when we cut costs. The big ones to note, the restructuring of administration to the program where we have a principal and superintendent role that is merged, adding a dean of student support. That restructuring is a savings of $107,000. There are a host of staffing tweaks that don't impact class size or our offerings. There's a $95,000 savings there. We'll have more detail on that. The potential to shift from 4 early education classrooms to 3. We've had some conversations about the size of those classes. That's a savings of $86,000. And we're anticipating a few retirements. And as you know, when you're at the end of your career, your pay cycle, and we're more likely to replace someone with that is a little lower on the cycle so that they're with us longer, which is great. So our required reductions for that offset between revenues being down and increased costs, we needed to find $760,624 in cuts. This budget is going to lack some flexibility that we have had in the past, and we've been really transparent with town finance about that as well. By the close of this year, we're probably going to have $156,000 of unbudgeted leave of absence this year. Fiscal 23 wasn't particularly better. We have never planned for that. We've always just had to shuffle as the year went on. And that didn't feel like a responsible way to budget to this subcommittee. And so this year we've managed to cover those leaves because we couldn't fill the Spanish opening and because we restructured administration mid-year. Prior years, when we had those kinds of unexpected costs, we would have to go to town and ask for support and relief. But we know that the free cash for fiscal 25 for the town budget is especially limited. And so we are planning accordingly. Even though we don't know who might be out or what's coming, we know that based on many years, we need to plan for that. And so we added a new line to this year's budget, and we're holding $44,000 right now for leave of absence. If we have funding left over from this year, we'd seek to add it to that fund. So that being a pretty big change, does the committee have any questions about that before I move on? Okay. Doing a little more for a little less as best we can. Our budget puts in 99% of what DESE's preliminary posted tuition funds will be. So we've budgeted for 620. If we get a little more, we'll consider ourselves fortunate. As we talked through this last year, we spent out the 180 that was in that balance. This year's choice dollars is 9% less than what we got last year, but I want to take you back a year when the difference in choice funding was a 28% drop. So we haven't closed the gap, but it's a better story than where we were a year ago. And so just to sort of give some proportionality to this, if you look at the graphic at the bottom of that page, you can see in the dark purple bar, that's last year's budget. The town's amount and the total. If you look at the shaded area, that reflects choice revenue and grants. So that's basically anything outside of town. That's money, that's that portion of the budget. And then you can see in fiscal 25, where the new costs came in, it bumped that line out. And so we had to find the reduction. And you can see in the little bitty white box, that's the difference in what we're asking town to make up. So we're asking for 149,000 more. And then the red dotted line that's on the other end is the difference in the total budget, 94,719. So it's 1.3% less in total And that gets a little confusing because we're asking more from one, but the total is a little down. Any questions about that? So to detail out when we talk about near level service and what those service changes are, we worked very hard to make sure that we kept reductions in every way as far from classrooms as we could. If you're on Zoom, if you could mute, please, that would be great. We worked to make sure that our changes were just and equitable. With two exceptions. We're managing that through anticipated retirements. And no one wants to cut. But this is the funding we have. So the detailed services, we're maintaining our superintendent principal with Dean of Student Support model. We're adding a new post of a library technician, which will be split between schools. So we currently have a full-time librarian who is retiring, who also taught computer science. Classes will be picked up, but there's been no library coverage at the elementary. And so the new library tech will be a lower salaried position and not a library science position, but they will split their time between schools. We're reducing a post of the guidance counselor at Smith Academy from full-time to 0.6. The focus will be on scheduling and college prep, and it fits our current enrollment needs. And we're reducing one special ed teacher at Smith Academy, which meets enrollment needs. And that reduction is met through retirement. At Hatfield Elementary, we have a new post of a part-time 0.5 special education teacher. And this is what we're being able to take advantage of, the retirement of one full-time post, and we're shifting this down to Smith Academy, which is going to help balance workloads. We're shifting we're recommending a shift from 4 early education classes to 3. The enrollment of our pre-K is right at the cusp of requiring 2 rooms. Our kindergarten is currently held at the potential of 22, depending on how many local residents come in. It could go over 22 if there are more local residents. In both cases, there could be a need to open a second class. And the teaching reduction that we're anticipating in that would be met through retirement. We're recommending a more avant-garde change here to shift elementary band into aftercare. The potential is that it would open up music lessons to more grades. It would allow for more time on core curriculum during the regular school day for 5th and 6th graders who are currently pulled for band. And it maintains the music offerings at Smith Academy. And I'm sure there's questions about that, and we're happy to answer them. And not everything is final, I would say either. And we're looking to add 4 additional full-time educational support professionals, plus there would be a pickup from 1 in the pre-KK model. So there would essentially be 5 additional ESPs working in the elementary school, which helps meet anticipated needs and adds greater flexibility for any urgent support. We're working hard to maintain our vibrant offerings. It's really important that we don't cut any more than we have to as we continue to work to build back enrollment. This plan still lets us maintain small class sizes, even in the world where we might have to cut back in early education. It still lets us maintain a preschool offering with some potential to grow. It keeps the number and diversity of electives at Smith Academy. It keeps expanding sport offerings into middle schools wherever team sports are possible. There's kids available. It maintains software for students and technical support. It continues rigorous professional development for staff. And we're able to add 2 new electives through semester course offerings without a staff increase at Smith Academy. So the detail of the staffing required for this and enrollment projections are shown there. They are the current enrollment plus confirmed new school choice. And so when we get to the business meeting, we'll talk a little bit more about school choice, but these numbers show not the people who have applied, but the people who have applied and responded that they are accepting a spot in our district. It is a shift in the number of full-time teaching roles, and it increases the ESPs. The custodial and administrative assistants would be the same. We would reduce by 1 administrator. All in all, it's a net gain of 1 head count compared to this year. And that's because of the ESP counts, which are going to be contractually based. So if you didn't have enough numbers yet, here's another way to take a look at that pie. So the town split, the choice funds, revolving grant money, the difference in each of those. So you can see our choice funds are 25% of what we had this year. Moving on, a little bit of a history just as a reminder about what we have asked town to support us with. Historically, if we look at FY16 through 22, our increase was on average a 2.24% increase in town spending. This year we're asking for 2.5, not dramatically different. It is, however, dramatically different than what we asked for in 23 and 24. So we're getting back to the norm of what we have asked for, and hopefully still building plans that let us continue to build an enriching program and getting more, keeping kids and getting new kids. Just a reminder, there's stabilizing funds that help offset that. Chapter 70 goes to town, not to us. We're not expecting it to be a significant increase, maybe $30 more a student. We did explore what would happen if town opted to level fund us, sort of a zero budget. If that was the case, we would be looking at the loss of an additional 2 to 3 staff. We would see a cut of probably a fair chunk percentage of our AP classes. We would lose academic electives. The middle school model would be gone, and we would lose some additional elementary specials. But while all that is sobering, there's still a lot to look forward to. We think we have a healthy district in many ways. And the override put us in a much better position relative to a lot of neighboring districts. So when I think about, Northampton is publicized, they're looking at a 14% change to level service, which they're not going to be able to get. And they're making massive cuts. We're reading about layoffs of teachers in several districts. We're not where they are, thanks to the investment Hatfield made last year. And there's some really good things we're seeing out of that and opportunities. So for one, the school choice enrollment, while we need to grow it, it's still ahead of the curve. So in fiscal 22, we were down 17 choice students. In 23, we were down 24. That's bad. Last year, we were down, but we were down 8. And it was hard to be down any when we had 40 applications. And what we realized and have rectified coming out of last year, we could not give earlier acceptances last year because we didn't really know what we were going to be bringing anybody into. So when you think about a year ago, we didn't know if we were going to be 2 classrooms per grade or 1, because if the override hadn't passed, we would have had to have shifted a lot of those classes. And so we didn't accept choice students until after we knew where we were. And that window is not parents need to know. And other programs, doors were closing. And so we didn't get those students. We've since rectified that by changing our policies about when we accept students. I think we'll continue to get better and better. And I think the fact that we're seeing the acceptance rates we already have so far this year is a testament to that. But even at that, we have a higher percentage than most. Frontier is holding steady in their number of choice students, but their overall enrollment is dropping. So they have a higher percentage than we do at this point. They're at 30% choice students. Hadley is gaining in the number of choice students, but not quite the same percentage of enrollment. And I think that's due to their marketing. Northampton has been dropping about 10 choice students per year, and it's only about 7% of their enrollment. Pioneer is down to 48 kids coming in, that's 8%, and about 40 from their district that go elsewhere. Mohawk Trail is at 13% choice, Amherst at 9%, and Holyoke at 3%. We've taken a look in previous meetings that talk about our potential to maintain our district. In the past 20 years, we've averaged 26 kids in kindergarten. The current HES classes average 25 students in kindergarten apiece. So if we had the same general starting number of students for the past 2 decades to what we have now, that would point to being fairly viable. And we also know that traditionally we're picking up a number of students from kindergarten on. So we're anxious to return to that. When you look at, we talked about the alternative costs. Hatfield's educational spending is on par for the state as a percentage of its total budget. But its educational spending is notably less than our regionalized neighbors. And, you know, we do hear the occasional cry for we should regionalize because it would be cheaper. And I think we can just say, if it were, our neighbors would be saving funds. So Sunderland and Deerfield, very comparable in many ways to Hatfield in financial ways. Each of those districts are spending 59% of their total municipal budget on education compared to our 51. So that's as a percent of the overall budget. As a look at how much districts spend per student, we'll flip to the next slide, and our per pupil expenditures, we're making grounds. So a year ago when we looked at this same slide, we were so at the bottom that it was kind of embarrassing. And now we've moved up. We spend in the bottom 35% of the state instead of the bottom 6% of the state. If we spent per student what Sunderland did, we would need to spend, with our current existing enrollment, we would need to spend an additional $1.4 million. If we spent the way Frontier spends, we would need to spend an additional $944,000. So this is just a way to sort of take a look at if we spent per pupil, what would that look like? And also, you know, for the committee to see there, it's a look at what their increases have been year on year, because our increase going into 22 was the last year Desi's made this available for. We had an 11% increase. Average for the area was 11%. However, Amherst was higher, Mohawk Trail was higher, Pioneer Valley was higher. A lot of folks have been north of that. And one of the things that we make sure that we are mindful of when the regionalization conversation comes up, as soon as you regionalize and the increases are outside of the town control, there's no opportunity for negotiation. The most important reason I think we should be optimistic about our district comes with an academic comparison. And we've pulled together 10th grade MCAS scores. And so this is the last line. This is what you have to be able to do to graduate, right? So meeting or exceeding expectations, the graduation competency requirement, Hatfield outscores all of our neighbors and the state, with one small exception where I would say we are on par. But if we want to take a look, our ELA, math, and science scores compared to Hadley, we're up going ELA, math to science. In ELA, we're up 13. In math, we're up 27 points. In science, we're up 4. Compared to East Hampton, up 20, up 39, up 15. Compared to Frontier, in ELA, up 20. In math, up 18. In science, up 14. Compared to Hampshire, up 12 in ELA, 27 in math, and 18 in science. Compared to Northampton, We're up 7 in ELA, 16 in math, and our only spot where we are not above our peers is against Northampton in science, where we are slightly behind them by 2 points. When we compare Hatfield MCAS, our academic competency at the end of the Hatfield career, compared to the state, our English language arts scores are 25 points above the state average. Our math are 33 points over, and our science is 25. And that's why we'll do well. So with that, you have before you a total budget of $7,136,170. If I misspoke, I'll say it again. The town piece of that, $6,122,016. The choice percent is 8.7 for $620,000. The grants are budgeted for 3.2% of the budget, and the revolving accounts would make up the last 2.4%. So before we put this to a vote, I'm going to first ask the committee, do you have any questions? It's a lot to take in.
Kudos to Dr. Driscoll and Riley for their total restructuring of the budget and laying it out in a much clearer and comprehensive way. And to the Finance Subcommittee, Christy and Adam, you guys have outdone yourselves. This is by far one of the best budget presentations I've seen.
It's not been easy choices.
No.
Adam, did we miss anything that you want to speak to?
Not in particular. I want to take a moment just to recognize that we're being more conservative with some of our numbers than in previous years, less budgeting on hope, and more budgeting on what we know we'll get when it comes to grants, when it comes to choice funds, when it comes to circuit breaker funds for special education. We're budgeting more on what we're confident we're going to get as opposed to what we hope and what we think we will get, so that we have less unknowns going through next year, and less, hopefully fewer stressful finance committee meetings next year.
Fewer surprises. I think one of the things that we've worked really hard is to find ways to make cuts that are as equitable as we could be and as far from kids and still giving a lot of support. And it's, I mean, obviously we would love to fund everything. It's not a given that we will get through town meeting unscathed. So we still need to have support at town meeting to come speak to the budget and answer questions and vote to pass the budget. But right now, that 6.1 million is what's in the proposed budget going forward, as best I know.
7.1.
The town part is
Oh,
just
town
6.
part.
So, anything you want to add?
No, I don't think so. I appreciate the gratitude that was shared. I think it's worth noting that it's not a happy budget that we're looking at. We're still talking about reductions, and that's never an easy thing. Never an easy thing to do.
Within the presentation, that we mentioned the shift from 4 early education classes to 3. Do we want to talk about that structure at all now, or is that for a different part of the night, or is that?
I think ultimately the committee needs to vote on a budget. This budget supports that model. The budget would not support that class reduction happening somewhere else in the district, because from a cost standpoint, if we were to say, I'm just going to pick on 4th grade because my kid, right? If we were going to merge that into one classroom, that wouldn't have the same cost savings as a reduction in early ed because it's both a teacher and a paraprofessional or a ESP, excuse me. So I think the vote itself determines that it happens within those two grades. But I don't think it's the committee's purview per se to determine what that looks like. Ultimately, it's administration's job to figure out exactly what that would look like. Do you want to say more about what that would look like
Well, I think
or how you would determine?
we'd like to make that decision, any change in model or programming with input from the early childhood team at the elementary school and administration.
Who is the, I think I've got all this, but who is the, it's an additional licensed support staff?
That is the library technician.
The library tech.
So it's essentially moving out of a teaching position into that professional role.
Okay. And then we had talked in previous meetings about hiring RBTs. Or does the district currently have any RBTs in
I'm
district?
going to define RBTs for everyone.
Okay. And so that was then my question. So is that, would, in this budget, would an RBT be considered different than an ESP, or in the budget, is it all kind of as needed, it's lumped in together?
Currently, they're in the same line. Right now, we have, I believe, one RBT that we've hired district-wide. When that cost is in.
Could either of you explain
Define what an RBT is.
the acronym, please? Because not everybody will know what an RBT
Yeah,
is.
it's a registered behavior technician. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have several other RBTs that are helping fill unfilled roles currently, but that's being paid through the SEL mental health grant for this year. So, but we have one that is ours that would continue.
I have a comment, but not a question.
Sure.
I like the idea of the library tech covering both buildings. The elementary has been without library services for many, many years, and that's unfortunate. So having a librarian back into the elementary school to help process books and do things there will be a really nice addition.
It feels equitable.
Yes.
Dr. Driscoll, I had a question about shifting elementary band to aftercare.
Mhm.
So right now, band is available to students as just part of the curriculum. It's available. There's no charge.
Mhm.
Aftercare is a charged program. If a student wants to be part of band, but not specifically part of aftercare, or if their family struggles financially to pay for aftercare, is there an option for them?
Yeah, we would have scholarships available or need-based programs to support that, similar to how we do with field trips or that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Is that set in stone yet, that change?
No changes are set in stone yet.
We have to vote a budget through before things would start moving. But I believe the administration did try to make sure that anyone who was personally affected isn't finding out about it through this meeting.
And would contracted services be included in the budget under teachers and licensed staff?
They're going to fall into the budget in instruction, mostly.
Yeah, I
It's-
believe so.
Where?
It's part of that instruction total. So they're separate line items. If you look at the line item based budget, they're not part of teaching staff costs. They're separate from that, but they roll up into instruction. The committee, do you have a problem if I shift to taking questions from the public? You can come back. Public that's with us. Does anybody have questions or comments that you would like to make? Okay. Is there anyone with us on Zoom that would like to make a comment or a question? I don't know if there is still anyone on Zoom.
There
There are.
Yep.
Okay. So anyone from Zoom? Okay.
Take everything.
This is quite the conversation, guys.
Dr. Driscoll, can you, up to date now, like, your best knowledge, what do our numbers look like for preschool and kindergarten next year for enrollment?
Preschool is currently 20 students. We have 11 students Monday through Friday, 6 students Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and 2 students coming, 2 days a week, 3 students coming 2 days a week. 18 of those are residents, 2 are non-residents.
Could you say,
those-
could you give that one more time
Sure.
since that's not on our sheet?
There are 20 total preschool confirmed. There are 11 that will come 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. There are 6 who will come 3 days a week. And there are 3 that will come 2 days a week. 18 of those are residents, 2 are non-residents.
When you work out a schedule that looks at how many preschoolers you have on any given day, what is your sort of FTE version of preschool?
We first take a look at the Monday through Friday students, and then we try to divide, we basically look at it and try to divide it equitably. So there's an equal amount of students in each classroom.
So right now we're topping out, it looks like 17.
I believe it's actually 18. One of the 2-day a week is
Falls on one of the
Monday,
same days.
as a 3-day week. Yep.
But historically, that's how we've done it.
But that's up since we've talked about it last.
And I have up to, unless you have something different, I have 16 that have responded yes to coming to kindergarten. Did that change? I know there was a few more that had come in, so that's 20.
We're up to 20.
20 for kindergarten.
Yep.
I knew there was a few more that had just registered.
The kindergartners have been the to-be kindergartners have been very fast about getting their responses in.
Is that 20 resident students or is that a combination of choice and?
It's total. Choice and resident.
Yeah.
Confirmed choice
Right, yes. Yeah,
and
yeah.
local.
At this point, we have 21 students, new school choice students who have confirmed for next year, district-wide.
Out of 30 applicants?
31, yep.
So we had given the school choice students a deadline,
Mhm.
which has passed.
That has passed, yep.
The ones who have not said yes, have they said no or just not responded?
Some have said no. Majority have not responded one way or the other.
Do we continue to follow up anyway?
We will, yep.
Okay.
In fact, we've been doing that this week.
So is there a motion to approve?
Can I ask
our-
one more question?
Absolutely.
It's about preschool. So you gave us the breakdown of days of the week. Do we have any breakdown for 3-year-old versus 4-year-old?
I did not look at that data. I just was looking at totals.
All right, you want a motion?
If you guys are ready for it.
I'll make a motion to approve the fiscal year 25 budget as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of the presented FY25 budget, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So with that, Kathy, you're right. I was late. We're late. Getting on to the next meeting. So I will make one last opportunity. Anybody? Last comment there. You'll get a chance in the next meeting. We have another public comment. With that, can I have a motion to adjourn our
I'll make a
budget
motion
hearing.
to adjourn our.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Great. That concludes our budget hearing for the year. Thank you for your patience. So, moving in to our next meeting of the night, technically, as we call to order, as we do at the start.
That's my fault. I'll get it.
Okay. We always kick off with an opportunity for a mission moment, and just ways that our district is meeting and exceeding our goals. Any good stories from?
I want to just say a huge kudos to the Frank Jackson, Jamie, I'm going to mispronounce her name, Leah Gardner, the Bringing Back the Musical. I went Thursday night. It was fantastic to see more elementary school students participating and cast members in the production of Willy Wonka Jr. It was just heartwarming to see, and so many people enjoyed it, myself included.
It was awesome. We got a golden ticket, so
Oh, lucky.
it was very fortunate. Other mission moments?
I'd like to echo that one. That was my mission moment as well. Going there and seeing not just the talent and the hard work that the student actors put on, but also the support of the community. There were a lot of people. I went opening night. There were a ton of people in the audience there. In front of what I hear, there was about the same crowd at every show. So it was really a well-attended event to support the musical.
I have a mission moment from this week. I had the opportunity to sit with Kim Tran, who you're going to hear from in a minute, and we opted to sit outside of HES to talk, which is a great space to use on a nice day. It also gives you the opportunity to see what's going on in the school. And for someone who has been with our district for a relatively short time, I was so wowed by the number of people who came by and lit up when they saw Mr. Tran, and the number of kids who he knew by name and the parents who he knew, and just that interaction and thinking about how that we look to enrich our community and sort of have an invested community. And I just saw that on display the entire time we met. And, one student was out on a break and came over to say hello, and another one actually sat down with us for a few minutes, just checking it out. But it really spoke to what kind of a community is happening and the investment that Mr. Tran has made in us, which I thought was really beautifully displayed. And I have one other. I actually put it on here because it's not a mission moment, so I have a little moment of recognition. So, Ms. Maloney, this is your last meeting.
It is.
I'll cry, but you won't. So I'm just pass that to you. But I just want to give us a chance to say thank you for 3 years of service. I don't know that any of us know what we're getting into when we sign up for this gig. But I appreciate your insights that you've shared, the knowledge that you've brought, and that you've come along for the journey through changing dramatic years on occasion. So
Thank you very much. I will miss it.
service.
I will miss
So that might mean she's coming back.
it.
Someday you might come back.
Never know. So we don't have a consent agenda for tonight.
You skipped public comment.
And I did, just right over it. Saw the little video link there and moved right on. So forgive me, I will reopen public comment. Would anybody like to speak to anything that is on tonight's agenda? We don't often get guests. We're so happy you're here, but you're very quiet. Is there anyone on Zoom that would like to make a public comment about anything on tonight's agenda? Okay, see none. We will move on. we have a conversation about sixth grade on here twice. I'm going to defer to have that in the administrative updates and move straight on to a conversation in our deep dive for the month about social emotional learning and an update on that. And so we have a presentation, which I'm excited to have. I think you might have seen part of it, right?
It's just so late, and I would be so sad if you felt pressure to stay. If you stay, great. If you don't, honestly, I encourage you to not stay. Okay.
We won't frown on it if you go.
Yeah,
They might
seriously,
want to
it's so-
talk about the
It's
cell
amazing that
phone.
you're all here. I mean, it really does speak to this town, and I'm still relatively new to this town. But yeah, it's amazing. So you're all staying. Okay. Cool. Great. Yeah, so this is my first time doing a presentation in this format. I'm excited for it. It's going to be a good way for me to practice and preach my social emotional learning knowledge.
Can I move this or tilt it so you can see it better?
Yeah, that'd be
able to
great.
See where we are in the slideshow.
Yeah, so, yeah, that'd be great.
You can just give me some kind of signal when you want me to switch
Okay,
slides.
sounds great. Yeah, and I'll try my best to, man, it's so late for everybody. I feel so sorry. I hope you enjoy it anyways.
Meeting. You got like 3 more hours. You're fine.
Oh, okay, well, there you go. All right. So my name is Kim Tran, and I am the district's mental health liaison. It's a fully grant-funded position. I just want to make sure that's very clear based on the budget. Before we begin, though, we've just been through a lot of serious conversation, and everyone's been through a whole day of school, a whole day of life, and I always feel it's really important for us to try to shift gears in a way for us to be able to just kind of reduce the clutter in our minds. It's called the Mindful Minute. So anyone that's willing to participate, I would encourage you to. I will not pressure anyone to not if you aren't on board with trying it. So I will just ask you to close your eyes for just 1 minute. I want you to focus on your breathing. Normally we would use a YouTube video for this, but based on the format, it might not be the greatest way to do it. So I'm just going to try to have you close your eyes, take some deep breaths, try to let go of the day, and hopefully it'll allow us to really be in tune with this presentation. Starting now. And we can go and open our eyes. I hope people are feeling a little more relaxed, hopefully not completely asleep yet. And we can move on to the next slide. Generally, this is done with music or it's done with a timer, but I really hope you were able to get something out of that. So today we're going to talk about a workshop, a social emotional learning workshop that we went through with both faculties, Hatfield Elementary as well as Smith Academy. I just want to say before we dive into it that I was very impressed with both staffs. They were both very much present. It would have been very easy for them to not be. I've been in other districts and other staffs, which were all great, but we're all human. And, after a long day of school, it's really hard to not have side conversations and not be completely focused. But I was very impressed with both staff. They did a great job and I really enjoyed it. To start out the presentation, And I would encourage anyone that's watching, as well as the school committee, just to think about 4 questions. We opened this before we even talked about social emotional learning, is what do you wish for your students? Just in general, what would you wish for your students? And this is all going to be rhetorical at this point, but that was the basis of this whole presentation. 3 underlying questions that go along with that is, how can we help our students? What do you do to help our students achieve these wishes? And what can we do as a team to achieve these wishes? The point of this was to set the stage. It's being a teacher or an educator in general, principal, parent, it's so easy to get off track with and forget about why we started this in the first place. And social emotional learning is really about getting back to what we were here for. Some of the answers that were given were incredible, that I'll be happy to share at a different time. But there was, I figured that there would be the same answers. I wish my students to be happy. I wish for them to get a good education, but there was just such an impressive multitude of answers that were given with all 4 of these questions that I will be happy to share at a different time. We can move on. So I was able to compile, this is not the entire list of what was the answers that were given, but if you would like to just take a minute or 2 to read for people that aren't able to see this, some of the answers are to become kind and safe to themselves and others as adults, to feel part of the community, feel respected, confident in their abilities. I won't read the whole list, but if you can see, I didn't start the presentation by saying we're going to talk about social emotional learning. We just want to talk about what do we want our students to gain out of their experience with us. And if you see some of these answers, they blew me away. We can go ahead and move to the next one. So I didn't edit any of the statements that were given. I honestly took everyone's feedback. I had them write it down during the workshop. And if they were willing to turn it in, which they all did, which was pretty great, I was to try to go through it all and see what themes came out. But given how great the answers were, I honestly I wrote them all down, or at least most of them. And the answers are pretty great. We can just keep moving on, yeah. It wasn't just one. If you notice the themes of it, you don't see cliche answers. They gave genuine, true answers, and there was just a great variety. But it all came down to supporting our students, helping them feel part of the community. Of course, getting a great education is important, but it just showed that both staffs really do understand that. It really is about helping the students feel like they're part of the community and that they're worthy of being part of schools and that everyone's important. Some of the answers they give about how they work together, how they personally achieve these wishes were great, and they didn't have any chance. They didn't have time to think about it the night before or anything. These were all genuine answers that came during this workshop. Okay. I titled this workshop the Hatfield Public Schools Inaugural State of the SEL Program. I say inaugural because my hope is that this becomes an annual conversation. Just a disclaimer, it's clear that there's been a lot of great social emotional learning work in Hatfield. I am relatively new. So if I say anything that discredits what's been going on here, I strongly apologize. But my hope for this anyways is that this is something that becomes a more consistent conversation, hence the term inaugural. Next year, hopefully it will just say State of the SEL Program. I thought it was very important for them to understand who I was. So once again, I'm Kim Tran. I'm the mental health liaison. I graduated, I'm from Washington State, so I'm new to Massachusetts. In my career, I've been very blessed, honestly, to have a multitude of positions. I was a paraeducator to start out, which is what's called an ESP here. I was also a substitute teacher. I was fortunate enough to become a special education school counselor for a year. I was able to work with students with IEPs and be their personal school counselor and help them set behavior goals, and also work with them on school counselor related activities, as well as with staff and with their parents. I was a PE teacher for 1 year. My bachelor's is in K-12 education with health and fitness. I was a school counselor in 3 different schools. One school I had a position as a full-time counselor, but with 750 students split between 2 schools. I had another school where I had 350 students. And then I had another school where I had 750 students. So fortunately, it allowed me to be able to see a lot of different programs and hopefully take the strengths of those programs while also acknowledging limitations of those programs and bring it to Hatfield and try to enhance an already great program. I was a social emotional learning coordinator up north for a year. And then when I came back here, I became a cafeteria cashier. The school district, when I first got to Hatfield, my daughter was in preschool last year and they really needed a cashier. So they sent out a flyer and I was like, okay, well, I can do this for a little bit until you find someone permanent. I stayed there the whole year, which was great. It was a great opportunity. But that also allowed me to get to know staff and get to know the students. And by fortune, the mental health liaison position opened up and I applied and fortunately has been part of it for about 1.5 years now. Last but not least, I am a father to a student at Hatfield. And I'm also a resident of Hatfield. And I say that because I want you to understand that I have a true, genuine stake in the success of this school district. And I'm highly invested in helping us become even greater than we already are. So this is for reference only. The purpose that I had for the staffs at each of these workshops, we did one at Hatfield and one elementary and then one at Smith Academy. I honestly wanted to congratulate each and every staff member. Unfortunately, the ESPs weren't at those ones, but I honestly, anyone that's been in education understands that the ESPs are the glue that keeps the school running. But I wanted to congratulate each and every one of them for everything they do for our students, which is why when we talk about the framework, it'll all start to make more sense. I wanted to congratulate them because honestly, if you've been in education, you would have a pretty good understanding that teachers and staff support, they're their harshest critics, as hard as that might be to believe sometimes. They are their biggest critics and they deserve credit for what they're doing and all the hard work they put in. And when we go into the framework, part of it was to help them understand that they're doing so much that they might not even realize they're doing. And I just wanted to make sure that was very clear. The next purpose was to have a team understanding and a review of our current SEL strategies. And just to begin a team dialogue of what we would want to achieve together in regards to social emotional learning. We have you're going to hear me say this over and over, but our staffs are truly incredible. They all have their own skills. You know, we all have our room to grow, but they have so many skills. And honestly, the point of the framework, I'm already kind of skipping ahead a little bit, is just to help us all kind of unite and work together to make sure we're all have the tools that we need to understand what we're working towards together. So one thing I just wanted to point out, and I wanted to make sure they understood this. I would imagine most people understand this, but just in case, some common misconceptions of SEL, social emotional learning, or sometimes called SEL as well. It's not rewarding disruptions. It's not allowing students to get away with everything. It's not zero consequences. Some people might believe that social emotional learning doesn't have consequences, but honestly, you need both to be able to be effective. And I wanted to make sure it was clear that I understood that. It's not giving in, and it's not making excuses. And above all else, it's not brainwashing. Social emotional learning, as you'll see when we go into the definition, it's honestly about kids learning about themselves, staff learning about themselves, all of us learning about ourselves and what makes us us. During the presentation, I asked them to have a little turn and talk time, which is where people partner up during a workshop and they answer questions that answer prompts. So what I asked them to think about before I gave my definition, because I want to value their opinions, is what do they think social emotional learning, AKA SEL, actually is? Is it important or is it not? And I wanted to make sure that the not part was emphasized, because there might be people that don't think social emotional learning is important, and that's okay too. It truly is. If I said you had to believe social emotional learning was important, then I would be doing a disservice to social emotional learning in general. I believe I put down a few of the answers that were given in the next slide. It was wonderful. I wish, it didn't show up. That's okay. There were some really great answers that were given, and I was able to, this is how I wish you could have been there, because the conversations were great. It wasn't about, hey, so what are you doing later today? Or I hope this is over soon, at least not out loud anyways. Some of the answers that were given was that social emotional learning is learning effectively communicate, not with just your classmates, but outside of the school as well. And that answer resonated with me, and just understanding that our teachers aren't just about, everyone getting in line at school and doing their job, and then when they go home, they can be whoever they want. I mean, that part is true too, but they do care about how the kids perform and how they behave outside of school as well. That they do have the skills to be effective outside of school. One other answer that resonated with me was someone saying that social emotional learning is being allowed, understanding that you're allowed to have feelings in general. And I thought that was incredible as well. There were so many answers that were given that were just wonderful. Before we go into the definition of social emotional learning and the framework, I'm going to say SEL moving forward. I apologize, just to make it easier for everybody. I wanted to give a brief description of CASEL. And CASEL is the Collaborative for Academic SEL. It's basically the gold standard of the organizations that create social SEL competencies and criteria and trainings. There's just full disclosure, there are other organizations that are great as well, such as the American School Counseling Association. But CASEL is widely recognized as how you would want to create your comprehensive program or your social emotional learning framework. We can move on. So social emotional learning, according to CASEL, is the process through which young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that help us to understand ourselves, connect with others, achieve goals, and support our communities. That's a mouthful, but there's so much that goes into social emotional learning. And there's a wide variety of answers. But the idea is that not only are you learning social skills, how to effectively communicate, but you're also learning that there are more than two emotions, happy and sad, or in younger cases, happy or mad. And that teaching our students, while also teaching ourselves, honestly, that you can have multiple emotions and there's multiple responses. There's varying responses that are more effective than others in being able to meet the needs of whatever you're at a given time. So why is social emotional learning important? This has been a debate, maybe not a debate, that's probably not the right way to say it, but there are so many different answers. If you ask someone, even within this room, most likely, what is the overall goal of school? And some might say it's job readiness. Some might say to become smarter. Some might say to get to have self-actualization, to understand yourself, or even become an effective member of society. And all those answers would be, for the most part, correct. Hopefully a blend of all of those answers. And the reason why I bring that up is because through a different conversation, I would be very trusting that I would be able to prove that social emotional learning can help with whichever goal of education is what you would think would be the overall goal, that social emotional learning can support that. It'd be a much longer conversation than the time we have here, but that is why we are investing in our time and energy and the grants to enhance our social emotional learning program at Hatfield. So I wanted to share that one of the highlights that you'll notice in this framework is that we were able to identify and implement a curriculum, an SEL curriculum called Second Step. And Second Step is aligned with CASEL, and for the longest time was K through 8, and starting next year will be K through 12. People might have different opinions on Second Step in general, but one reason why we chose Second Step for this time being is that it does allow a scope and sequence that goes from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. And it highlights the points that we're trying to cover. This is just an example for grades K through 5. Unit 1 is about growth mindset and goal setting. Unit 2 is about emotional management. Unit 3 is empathy and kindness. Unit 4 is problem solving. We were able to pay for Second Step through the grant that Dr. Bremner and believe it or not, Nurse Jean, who I have to give a lot of kudos to. It's a behavioral health grant that they worked very hard, and I apologize if I didn't include anyone else that was involved in those grants. To be able to have the funding to hire me, and as well as all the other SEL initiatives that you'll learn about today and moving forward. Second Step being one of the main highlights. So I keep saying framework without talking about what a framework actually is. And according to CASEL, a framework creates a foundation for applying evidence-based SEL strategies. Without repeating everything that's on the slide, what it does is it allows us to, in an organized fashion, see where we're at as a district, and that will allow us to see if there's anything we can do to enhance any parts that can be stronger. So I spent the better half of a year working with the school counselors, observing classrooms, talking to teachers, working with Dr. Bremner and everyone else, just to see like, what does this district do? My goal wasn't to come in and just say, here's what I think is the best thing to do it. The way that I went about this was to see, what are we doing first? What are all the awesome things we're doing? Because these students aren't becoming awesome on their own, and this town isn't great on its own. There's got to be a reason, and through the work that I will be sharing, you'll get to see that there's a lot that is happening. And the SEL framework, just wanted to make sure it's very clear. It will include the signature practices of our district, meaning whatever's on that framework is what generally all teachers are doing. I just want to make it, the reason why I want to make that distinction is because it's not created to tell teachers, this is what you have to do. This is the only thing that you can do. A lot of teachers come with their own bag of, their toolkit is what we generally call it, that might be different than exactly what's on there, but the framework allows us to have like alignment of what our signature practices are. And of course, teachers and educators and ESPs are able to take that and build off of it. So once again, why is the SEL framework important? To me, not most importantly, but very importantly, is that it does give credit where credit is due. Once we're still in draft form on the SEL framework. I just want to be clear about that. And we're getting closer to a final document. And I want to put in quotations that I say final document, because it's honestly, it's going to be a live document that can change. It's not going to be set in stone. And we're going to create it in a way that allows for us to work together with our staffs to keep it consistent and keep it up to date. It's not going to be something that's you'll see changes throughout time for as long as the framework is around. Most importantly is that it creates transparency for our stakeholders. That was the main reason why we created it, because you can watch movies, you can read the news, you can just open your ears. You'll hear many different opinions about what schools are doing to support kids, all the way from going above and beyond to just throwing things on the wall and seeing if they stick. I believe that this SEL framework will allow our stakeholders, and by stakeholders, I mean the community, parents, students, even staff, to see what our plan is, what are we doing to support our students. And the hope is that it will lead to increasing trust and a stronger understanding of how we support students. I truly believe a lot of districts are struggling because they aren't transparent with their community. And I don't think they do it maliciously. I think there's just so much to do in school. And honestly, the staff here at Hatfield, what I found out was that they were working on a framework as well. And they built a good portion of it before I even got here. But I'm hoping that I can have the flexibility that they don't have to be able to finish the product together. It allows us to be aligned as a school, as a full district team as well. One of the big benefits of Hatfield being the size it is that we are able to communicate a little more effectively. I come from districts that have 10,000 students and 20,000 students and multiple schools, and it's really difficult to become aligned as a district team in those districts, and that is one of the big benefits. Of course, Hatfield's going to grow, and that's always wonderful. But the hope is to become aligned now before we become bigger and bigger. And hopefully the size that we're in right now allows us to be able to really get this, to to get this job done, because if it was at a different district, it would take years and years. Last but not least, it does ensure that social emotional learning is officially a top priority. I'm biased, but I do believe that social emotional learning is up there with math, reading, and science, and all the other subjects. But by having an SEL framework and having strategies and having competencies for it, it will officially be a top priority moving forward. And hopefully our stakeholders and future stakeholders will get to see that, and they will understand how much we value it. So this is just a snapshot of what the framework is going to look like. Once again, it's in draft form. I've already been taking the feedback that's been given. Our teachers are awesome. We want to make sure that it wasn't just me creating it, or it wasn't just the principals creating it. It was a full team effort, and they've already given me some great points. One being to make sure that it's easier on the eyes. So this is a lot of words. As you scroll down, it gets even more confusing, and I promise that I will make it more understandable, more readable, so that it's effective. Each school has a tiered support document as well, and that goes along with the framework. It breaks down, when it comes to education in general, we always talk about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 1 is generally all students are accessing whatever's under tier 1. Tier 2 is generally for students that need a little bit more support. They get all the tier 1 supports, as well as the specialized supports to meet their needs. And then tier 3 is for students that need even more support. So Smith Academy has their own document. It's still in draft form, but I do want to share that what's on here is being implemented already. If you see it highlighted in green, that means that these are near future strategies that we're hoping to implement. I promise it looks better than this, but it's very wordy on this slide. But the document, this is just a snapshot of what's included in the tiered support document. This one in particular being Hatfield's tiered support.
The elementary school.
At the elementary school, yes. This is just for reference only. During the workshop, we gave copies of the draft of each document and gave a decent amount of time. Of course, you could always use more time, but with the time frame we had workshop activities. The main goal was to help our staff to understand that their input really does matter, and that we're not just telling people what to do. So workshop activity 1 was individual review. Workshop activity number 2 was to partner up and give feedback. And then workshop activity number 3 was to switch partners and see, compare and contrast thoughts from the previous group. We were able to yield a lot of great information that I'm still going through, and we'll come up with the next draft and the next feedback share, hopefully 1 or 2 more times. So the next steps is to continue to collaborate with all district staff to create the final draft of the framework. Another exciting next step for me is that we're going to create an SEL page for the district website. This is going to be one of our most likely many ways of being transparent to current stakeholders and future stakeholders. And hopefully when people are questioning whether they want to choice their students into our district or into our district, they'll get to see that how we support our students, not just academically, but via social emotional learning. And then, again, just increasing transparency to all stakeholders, and by transparency also getting more input from stakeholders, such as having surveys or finding other modes of getting information to just build the trust of our district, as well as continue to work together with our stakeholders. The overall goal is to team together to meet the needs of all students and their families and the community as a whole. Together, everyone achieves more.
Thank you.
I believe is there one more slide or is that it? That's it?
I think
Okay,
that's it.
all right.
I have one more and it just says, thank you.
Okay.
might have seen the
I included
earlier
my email address for anyone that wanted to reach out personally. Best to just defer to the school counselors and principals, Dr. Brebner. If you have feedback for me or ideas or thoughts, I welcome all information. And I also welcome negative information if you feel like something I did was wrong. Just put that out there. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Do you want to say anything about SEL stuff before we have a conversation?
Sure. And
You all
what I just
stay.
handed out to the committee towards the end of that slideshow is one of those draft frameworks. So
And you have it electronically as well.
yeah, so you can take a look through this and see this is really a lot of hard work that Mr. Tran's been doing here to align what we do in our school. So what we do for instruction, direct instruction, what we do for school-wide policies, procedures, how we respond to things, how we proactively address things, and how we communicate and partner with families. Current practices and hopeful future practices that align to the five competencies of CASA. So the five social emotional competencies of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. As you flip through it, you can see, if 1A is included, it's spelled out in the first one here, but if it carries into multiple competencies, there is a lot of carryover between competencies. Rather than write it out, a bunch of times, we label it there. So as you take a look through this, you can see what some of those things are that we already do or are in the process of onboarding at Smith Academy to kind of drill into those different areas. There's a similar framework draft that exists for Hatfield Elementary School as well.
So how about let's start with questions specific to the presentation before we broaden out the conversation. Committee?
Is this a 1-year grant?
I think you're in this, are you in the second, you've been like a year and a half so far, yes? You speak to the,
It's multi-part.
Yeah.
So Jean's DPH grant comes every year, but the amount shifts drastically, it seems. It's been in the right direction, which has been lovely. And then we've been able to supplement with purchase of additional curriculum and signs and staff training and assessments through the SEL mental health grant, which ends June 30th of this year.
so what's the timeline to finish the framework?
My goal is to have a quote unquote final draft by the end of this school year. As stated, this is a year by year grant, and my hope is to have it in a way that it can carry over. Unfortunately, it'll fall on the responsibility of the school counselors and the team present to carry it as far as they want to. Of course, if I'm back next year, then we'll continue the work, but the live version will be done by the end of the school year. That's the goal. While also creating our main mode of transparency will be the website that I'm gonna start working on very soon.
You forgot to list on your number of various jobs that you have been a web page designer, maybe somewhere. You've had some web
Yeah.
experience.
Yes, I
Yeah.
do.
Just as it happens.
I
Before or after.
didn't
the
want to keep talking about myself
cafeteria
forever.
work.
So when might we know if you're coming back for next school year or not?
That's a great question. I would like to know that as well, but honestly, this is probably gonna bite me later, but if I'm not to come back next year via grant, I do plan to continue to support in some fashion because I am invested in this. My daughter is here. I believe in this community. I believe in this district. I will continue to be part of this in some fashion, maybe just not to the level that it is when it's grant funded.
We're actively looking for ways to make sure we can support that too.
That'd be great.
Other questions before anyone else? I have a few, but I don't want to jump in. You noted in the curriculum that there's 4 different units. Are those happening at every grade level and there's a amount of time per unit? Is that sort of
Yeah,
covered at grade?
that's a great question. I actually created a slide that did have that, but somehow got lost
Okay,
during this
just tell
presentation.
me.
Yes. So K through 5 has their 4 units. The themes are consistent. Of course, the lessons are developmentally appropriate. And then grades 6 through 8 have their own units and their own lessons that are developmentally appropriate. And actually, as of 2 weeks ago, literally, Second Step, the Committee for Children, created a curriculum for 9 through 12, which is adopted. It comes with our current license because we didn't have to pay anything extra for it, which was pretty wonderful.
So can the principals speak to when this shows up in the day and how this shows up?
You want to start the elementary?
Yeah, so what some of my teachers have done is they combine classes, but there are 20 lessons, and most of them have that as a professional practice goal to get through the entire curriculum this school year. So some have done it individually, but a majority of them combine their classrooms and do it together, collectively.
So not quite every week there's a lesson.
Correct.
Okay.
And they're in duration anywhere from maybe 25 to 40 minutes.
And at Smith Academy, our Ms. Anderson, our adjustment counselor, is also our advisory coordinator. And so part of what she does is she reworks some of these lessons to fit into our advisory block, which is a little shorter in duration than the time that we should allot to every lesson. So she breaks them down in different ways so we can do one lesson broken up into a couple sections over the course of the week in our advisory classes. So they do that twice a week. They do Second Step in advisory. Is that right, Mr. Wall? Twice a week?
Usually 3. So
3 times,
Tuesday,
okay.
Wednesday, Thursday.
Okay,
We split the lessons in thirds.
great.
Can I add something about that as well? I wanted to just to make sure it was noted that this is the first full year of implementation. I want to commend the teachers for building this into their schedules. Their schedules are already super busy as they are. But I've been impressed with how much they've been able to accomplish. And the goal moving forward with the information we've had for this year is to make this even smoother with additional training. They had training, but we can always improve on that. So as the goal is to hopefully have this for multiple years, and each grade level will carry what they learned over to the next year. So it'll just become smoother and smoother as we go.
So it's not a question, but it's a little bit of commentary. And I don't usually have my phone out in meetings, but I was having a conversation with a school committee member in another district of late. And I asked the question if this committee chair hears from parents with conversations or questions or complaints about what's going on in the classroom. And I just wanted to share, it's really relevant to this conversation. And so I wanted to share what the answer was. And so I'm going to quote, I really don't get any classroom level complaints, even from friends. Occasionally some grumbling from teachers, but we've done a lot in the last few years at creating uniform expectations and strategies across the schools for community building and SEL, and it seems to have really made a difference. And so when I look at what hits our inbox on occasion, or our text messages, or our passing friends at a sports field, I just look at what this work looks like and the impact that it can make because it's working in other districts around us. And it's not to say that there wasn't good stuff happening, but clearly that sort of building a uniform set of expectations and the training that goes with that can only build our district. So, and I didn't mean to really poke at you for grumbling. I wasn't suggesting any of you would, but I just thought that was insightful. So, other questions about SEL in general that maybe not necessarily specific to the presentation or the framework? I guess seeing no one jumping up at this, my big one I come back with repeatedly is how are we measuring our growth when it comes to social emotional learning as a district? I get that we have students that we can measure and we can look at that, but that is not a discussable thing. So how are we taking inventory of our skill set? Because there is no MCAS, right? There is, like, how do we look at this? What are we tracking?
So there are a couple different ways there. So there is no MCAS. There are MCAS-like surveys that exist to provide us with some information. Things like the vocal data that's collected. We have the SPIFFy group that comes in. They do a social emotional or youth risk survey. I believe Mr. Tran mentioned or maybe it's in here, a universal SEL screener that we'll be utilizing called the DESA screener, which actually is sort of a way of taking a benchmark kind of assessment of social emotional learning competencies. So there are ways that we can measure sort of objectively in that. So I think that's part of it. The other way, the more kind of qualitative way, is just by what's happening in our schools. So are we seeing increases or decreases in student behavior that we'd like to see changed? And what are we, when we put specific plans in place for students, are we seeing results of those plans? That data is tracked individually with specific students. And so we can say, yep, this is working. Nope, this intervention is not working. What are we going to do differently? Do we need to pull a team meeting together? What supports do we need? Are the responses that we're having, are they being effective or not? We can measure that through office referrals. So I know that when I or Mr. Duncan at Smith Academy have students referred to the office for something, we track that. And so we can say, yep, Connor Driscoll's been to my office 4 times this month, but he was down to my office 8 times last month. So things may be going in the right direction. We can do that more generally for all office referrals, as well as for specific students too.
Okay. So I hear office referrals are tracked. What are the other things that we're tracking related to behavior?
So one of the other things that at least in the elementary school, is we have a meeting every Friday with myself and the two counselors, our behavior interventionist specialist, as well as the counselor and the nurse. And we constantly are having conversations around students that are of concern, things that we have been hearing about, frequent flyer kinds of things. So we are always having conversations and talking about what are the plans, are we updating those plans? Do we need to do something different? That's a piece of it. I know that one of the things that we've talked about is having a more paper copied version of a behavior tracking. So again, this is something where Staff has been in the process of creating that. It's also mentioned in this as something that we need to continue to work on and flush out as a way of being able to also have conversations around noticing trends, noticing if there needs to be something addition to the tier 1 supports that we're providing, that maybe there's some tier 2 or tier 3. So that's something else that we're in the process of creating.
Are we tracking if classes are evacuated for disruptive behavior?
Yes, and those have been going out to families again, because that was a conversation that was had about wanting to give information, because there's a disconnect between the idea of a student goes home and says, you know, a student did something, the perception is that that disrupted the entire day or a very long amount of time, when in reality it isn't that. It's a blip in the day, and then everybody gets back on track. But I think it's important to be able to notify and let parents know that. So I'm trying to be more proactive in ensuring when I know that a room has been evacuated, that I am forthcoming with that information. That's just specific to the detail of, here's the time duration, this is what happened, this is how quickly kids got back to class.
And a couple things to that point I think that are important is I don't think there's an incident which occurs, at least not to my knowledge, where there would be something like a room evacuation and administration wouldn't know about it. That comes directly to us. The other piece that I think is worth saying is that this is an element of transparency that we have kind of committed to here in Hatfield that isn't universal. Most schools, if there's something that happens where it requires students to go to a different location, unless something happens where there's an injury, you likely wouldn't hear about it through
Except for your kid.
official means. Yeah, you might hear about it from your kid, but not through official means. So I think I think that speaks to the transparency we're shooting for here too, is that we have those mechanisms to communicate that out.
So if we're tracking things like behavior referrals to the office and evacuated classrooms, are we looking at that on at least a month-to-month basis to see what the trend line looks like for a building or a grade level or some grouping to see if we have trends?
We look at that weekly in my Friday meetings.
Numerically, not just anecdotally.
Yes.
Okay. And what is our trend?
We, well, it depends. Right now, we are seeing an increase in a particular class, but that's in the process of being,
I guess I'm looking
dealt
at
with.
school-wide, not classroom-based.
I wasn't anticipating that particular data question.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't as many, I think, this year. No, I mean, it's about the same amount as last year from this year.
Is that something that you could come back to the next meeting and let the committee know, and just sort of like, here, from a broad brush, I really don't want classroom or grade level information, just like on some scale that we can look at, because the conversations and what we hear from the community and what we get in this conversation, they don't always match up, and the data would be so helpful. And I think it's great that we're transparent. I think sometimes it also creates new challenges, for sure. Yeah.
I'll just make a comment.
For sure.
This could be just purely my own opinion. I think data is very important, of course. It allows us to see where we're at and provide a baseline and see a trend line. But I would caution utilizing the type of data that you were mentioning to track progress as far as social emotional learning, because not in this district necessarily, but districts in general, you can skew that so easily. Some ideas that are coming down the line that we're considering are more school climate surveys, seeing are people actually happy? Do they feel safe? I think that's more valuable than, it is, of course, it's valuable to find out, are kids being evacuated daily or weekly, or is that number increasing? But I think it's more valuable to just have a general understanding of how you feel at school. just my own thought on that. And that's something that is in the works.
And I appreciate hearing that because we don't necessarily know that that stuff's coming. Families don't necessarily know that
Sure.
that stuff's coming. And if there's a better way to measure it, I'm all for it. But I think we're at the point of we don't have any way to look and see how it's going except to hear anecdotal stuff. And if by the time it gets to a committee member and it's anecdotal, it's not likely to be a positive story someone wants to share, which is unfortunate because I think there are a lot of positive stories. I heard one today, but we don't often get that. And so I think it would be really helpful if we're going to be transparent with families that we're also finding a way to report back out the broad trends. And truthfully, if people could hear to counteract some of the blips, if it's a 5-minute blip, to also have the like, yeah, and here's what kids have to say about how they feel at school. Assuming that there is a functional way that happens at different grade levels, because usually that's stuff I hear about for more secondary focused. Like, the sticky stuff is older kids. Is there what's the version of this that looks for elementary kids? I don't know.
Well, a piece of it is adding in the DESA. The other piece is that we're having through the SEL Mental Health Grant is partnership with UMass and having Dr. Whitcomb come in and do observations and surveys in both buildings, but in different ways. So I don't know if each principal wants to talk about how you're going to be using that.
I mean, one of the things that the staff have said, we have a very different staff's background in responsive classrooms. Some people have had it, haven't had it recently. I brought someone who came in November to do a presentation and generated a lot of excitement about wanting to move forward. And then we had a whole bunch of other things that kind of came up in different future staff meetings that we kind of like, it lost some momentum. However, at the same time, responsive classroom is more than just the morning meeting. There's so many different other parts to it. And because of that, it'd be great to do a fidelity check. It's great to say we want to get back on ensuring that we have consistencies and common language with students, with each other, the adults themselves. But part of that is just kind of doing an inventory and then having some actual coaching that happens throughout the school year. That's not just once in a while, it's done actually more consistently. And the other piece I was about to say earlier too is, it's unfortunate that you're hearing so many parents complaining to you when I'm not hearing as much of those complaints, because part of this is we need to be able to hear from the families if there's something of concern. And I can say that I've had at least one family reach out and I have shared what I can, but sometimes they have reached out to me. They just don't like what they're hearing because I can't give too much information. So hearing we're taking care of this, we're aware of this, we have a plan in place doesn't sit well when a student is going home reporting something that's upsetting to them. But so it's a tricky line to walk around this perception that nothing happens when there are things happening. And they happen slowly. Behavior doesn't change on a dime. We need to put some things in place and give it time. And we've had some great successes in our school. And yeah, there are things that are going to perk up. We have kids who have trauma. We have kids who have had death in the family. We have had kids who have medical issues. Those kinds of things sometimes will cause big feelings. So as well as we get some things under control, there are definitely other things that then start to perk. So that's the reality of school.
Yeah.
It really is.
And it's the reality of school everywhere.
Yes.
And it's just a matter of continuous improvement. And this, I think the work that's been going on looks like great continuous improvement.
And I just want one more thing. We have some amazing teachers doing some amazing things.
I hope, can I just say right there, I hope that this conversation hasn't in any way given the impression that I'll only speak for myself, but it's probably not just me. I don't think any of us would question that we have amazing things going on. I think we're just looking to understand more and making sure that we're making positive trends, right? That because the conversation has been challenging of late. And I think the conversation is challenging in a lot of places. I don't think it's specific to us. And frequently, there's a lot that we cannot say.
Correct.
And hopefully my final comment, I just want to make sure it's very clear that that wasn't a response directly at your answer, because you're right, data does need to be collected. My take was just that what data we collect will be really important to keep in mind.
I think it's just a matter of my interest isn't the specific data. It is help find a way to measure it so we can track progress, because what gets measured gets done. And I think this matters. And so it's a matter of like, okay, how are we watching this unfold so that we can celebrate the successes? Because right now, I don't know that that's happening. Are we celebrating the successes? I don't know.
I think behavior data is more complex than any other kind of data.
Sure.
Because if a child knows 3 + 4 is 7, they'll know 3 + 4 is 7 next week, and they'll know it a month from now. But if they're able to regulate their body when they're given a demand on Monday, and their life happens, a social conflict happens, they have a tummy ache, any number of things, that regulation ability does shift. It's different than math. So the other piece of it is we are so small that there is some kids that come, some kids that go, some kids that need a different level of support. And so there is an apples to oranges piece of this too. And it's important for folks to understand that when we're working with individual students or classrooms, we are working apples to apples, but due to confidentiality, we cannot share that. And so I do think it is the trickiest type of data to share, because it changes in a way that academics don't. So we've created these systems over the last 3 years. The teachers have done an amazing job taking on and shifting and increasing tier 1 supports from, I think where we were 3 years ago, but also in the last 3 years, we have consistently increased academic demands of our students post-COVID. So that piece is changed as well. And we're facing other trends like staffing, which is a national thing. So again, there also needs to be some degree of trust when we're sharing that things are going a certain way, because there are so many components to behavior that are not the same as academic achievement.
I like the idea of potentially an SEL survey to the community, because I think that administrators having that mode of getting information from the community might help get all on the same page and bridge a gap, or just kind of lay the strengths and then the needs kind of on the table in a way that's not emotionally charged and is objective. I think that clearly by all the text in some of those slides that there's some great work going on, and I think it's a great way to be looking at tiered supports and setting up those supports and kind of having a framework, right, that sets kids up for success and then looks to kind of build on that. I think the concern of some of the concerns I'm seeing and how I'm missing in the presentation is how that supports or applies to students that might currently be in active crisis that need a lot more of that tier 3 plus, because we're coming out of COVID and there's a lot of, and there's a mental health care crisis, and resources are not available in a lot of places. I think that, and I can say that as someone who's been on the committee for a long time, it's not even clear to me for those kids, and not in a, not in a student specific way of reporting out what are you doing, but in a very general way, what are the supports and resources that the district has? What might those interventions look like? For today, the principal sent out an email that a classroom was evacuated, so that there has been some type of extension of this presentation that speaks to how is Hatfield handling crisis situations so that everybody is safe. How are we skill building, right? Because to Molly's point about behavior shifting and changing, but what are the skills that we're teaching every single day to prep kids that we know might have trouble with math, or there might be an increase in behaviors if they're tired, or they might have not taken their medication that day and we didn't know. What are the skills we're teaching to set them up to be successful in our classrooms? Who are the resources? Who are the people that are doing that? Do we have enough of that? Because I think that the concern from the community, I think that once that information gets out to the community once or twice, like everybody is understanding. But when it seems to be continuing and you're not sure of, not specific to that situation, but you're not even sure what the district's resources and supports would look like as far as space. Like, is there a separate safe place to bring students that are potentially going to be a safety concern to? Or what self-contained or specialized programs does the district have? Maybe a presentation of, in that way, again, just objective of, here's what we have, here are the resources, and here's how we would plan for students that really, the skill set that is required in a classroom is really much greater than we're finding that they may or may not have at this moment. But how are we planning for those kids? I'm not sure that, although I did look through all of it quickly, but I'll say that I have not fully sat down and digested. So I apologize if that information is in here. But for me, that information, this presentation didn't answer any of those questions that I have had for a while.
Sure. And I think that's certainly some information that, as we flesh out the SEL framework, where we break it down into those tiers, when we get into those tier 3 areas, those are supports that we could outline and we could document. Hatfield being as small as it is really difficult to get that information out there, specifically following some kind of crisis incident, without doing it in a way that readily identifies the student who is being supported, or whose services may be directed towards. And so that, one of the challenges with sharing that information out, in not in a broad sense, but in any kind of response to anything, is to do so in a way that maintains confidentiality. So I think that can certainly be an offshoot of something that we do with the SEL framework, to document the kinds of resources we have, the kinds of services we're able to provide in a general sense. But it would be very important to do that in a way that is crafted so as to not single any one, or even any class or grade level out.
I guess I hear, tell me if I've got this wrong, but what I hear you saying is, in general, if X happens, then the school's disposition is to do Y, and that there is a clear understanding of action and next step that is unrelated to any individual.
And that is something that we can certainly outline, I think, more clearly in some of our codes of conduct, with the understanding that for Connor Driscoll's student,
It may be different.
that
depending.
there, why may not be something that works.
Or
and
maybe
so-
it's a XYZ. There's the menu of things.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have to be prescriptive per
Yep.
se, but I guess I hear us saying we don't know any of, like, we don't know what the menu looks like.
Sure.
Even in, and I did pick up in one of the slides, like, oh, the behavior support team. Like, okay, does each building have one? What individuals are included on that team? At what point do they become involved? What does that look like? Very general, and maybe you make it like quarterly, just updates on that. So it's not tied to anything that may or may not be going on at that moment, but here's what we have, here's where we're seeing that we may need more supports, or we're looking to hire RBTs because we're finding that we have more need. I think that it's going to, in a town this size, that information is always going to come out. So, just kind of having it scheduled and being transparent of, hey, like, we have these needs and we posted for all these ESPs, but we don't have any, candidates, so we're subbing out. I think would be helpful in the trust and in the transparency moving forward. And I also think that, I'm talking very much about supporting kids in crisis who have significant skill deficits in the realm of social emotional learning and need to build those skills, but then also circling back and saying, and not forgetting, well, what is the impact as we're trying to figure that out to the rest of the students in the classroom? Because I think sometimes teams get so concerned about, because you have a student in crisis that you are trying to support and you're trying to keep everybody safe, but we have to have time to circle back to everybody else and say, how is everybody else doing, and what does that look like? Because if you're being told, like, don't laugh at this student when they're doing this to you, because that whatever it is, but just to check in with everybody else to make sure that that's not, another student that observed it or saw it or whatever it is, beginning to have, beginning to need additional support from just beginning to need additional support.
Yeah, I'm trying to align the great presentation that we just got and all the information that the administration is giving us with kind of the inbox. Because there is a perception reality mismatch, and we talk about this often, how the stories that get out to families might not actually match what's going on, but everyone's reality is kind of shaped by their perception anyway. So it's real to their student, to that family. I get feedback on things like, daily disturbances or multi-week disturbances in individual classrooms. And parents feeling like the students who are perhaps causing the disturbances are not adequately supported by design or by our school. And then, even if it's a blip, if it's just a 5-minute blip, a 15-minute blip, if it's 3 to 5 times a week, that takes a toll on all the other students in the classroom. And it gives families of those students a lack of confidence in our school, and that we are perhaps, I don't want to say prioritizing one student over the rest, but that's their perception. And I don't know how to kind of right side that. I don't know how to respond when I have parents reaching out and saying, this has been ongoing for months and months. We're not noticing a change. Or the only change that they've noticed is, a few new kids have joined the classroom and things have gotten somewhat worse. It's, again, perception or reality. If they're coming to me at that point, then it feels like they are feeling a failure on the administration's part to address the issue adequately. And I don't know if it's just communication or if it's showing that there's something more than just communication, that we are in need of doing more. We've lost families who have choiced out in the current fiscal year or next fiscal year. I worry that it could be more. And I don't know how to address that. I don't know if
So, I mean, first and foremost, I think I would hope that if families are reaching out to you or anyone on the committee, that they've also reached out to administration prior, so that they could, we could have the chance to provide some of the information that you might not have, about some supports that do exist. I do think, to Jen's point before, I think having a concrete way that we can outline both the supports that exist for individual students as well as for classes, I think that may be helpful to have not just for communication purposes, but also for you all to have, so you can say, well, did you get a chance to take a look at this communication or this update that was sent on at this time? Some information might be in there, but please make sure that you're sharing these concerns with administration too, so that we're not hearing it when when it's got to a point that folks are so upset they're contacting you all that we have a chance to speak to them first.
I will say,
And-
as a general rule, I send them back to start. I usually say, have you talked to the
Great.
classroom teacher?
Mhm.
I try to send them all the way back there first, because that feels like that should be the first place. And if they can't resolve then we're like, then you should go to the building administrator. So, and if you would prefer we send them elsewhere, we can talk about that. But
Right. Maybe in the first meeting that outlines kind of the supports in place, outlining a hierarchy of,
Chain of command.
Yeah.
here's where to go first.
and then that makes it really easy then for committee members, if they're getting those types of emails, to then just be relaying, here's the chain of command, here's the policy and procedures on who you should be contacting if you have concerns.
And to what we were speaking about earlier, with that kind of outlining those supports that we put in place broadly. Mr. Chairman was talking about the having the SEL designated portion of our website. That could be information that's readily available, not just for you all, but for community members,
Everyone.
who can go in and say, okay, here is the way that students are supported. So I think that could get to that piece as well.
I just
But
wanted to, yeah, sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
I just want to share that that's a big part of why we had this presentation today and why we're creating the framework, because not that it's going to cure every situation, but hopefully if our stakeholders have a better idea that we have a plan and that they have more information, that they don't have to use perception or use general thoughts about education as nationwide, that we actually are doing things, and hopefully that will help dissolve some of the worries that nothing's being done. They'll be able to see all the things that are being done proactively, and then also, to your point as well, not reactively, but on an as needed basis. And part of that website will include things like, chain of command, and what is our BST team, our Be Able to Support team, what does that consist of? Hopefully, if I do it well, it'll have all of that. Not that everyone will go to that website, but hopefully if you get a response like that, you'll be able to say,
It's a
here's
place
the
to direct
information.
someone, right? So, I mean, there's times that you need to push information out, and there's times it's got to be available for somebody to get it and pull it in.
Yeah.
And as much as I would like to think we could educate people adequately for all of that, that's unrealistic. There's going to be a thing that happens in a day, and they're going to speak up, and we can help redirect. But I still think getting some proactive communication as this gets up will be helpful. It nothing is ever a one and done. If you're trying to, as educators, as a communicator, it's like 6 to 21 times before someone gets it. You have to say it. So it's going to take some time, and change for behavior takes some time. And we might need a little education on what is an appropriate timeline. Like how long does it take in a classroom to see those kind of changes if it's big emotions, if it's big stuff, so that we set expectations accordingly. Sometimes I wonder if we as parents have appropriate expectations. Often we don't have another comparison. So some of you that work with kids every day have a comparison. Like, oh, this is what it looks like. All first graders are like this. Or all third graders are like this. And you kind of can level set that. For most parents who aren't sitting with kids every day, it's like, this seems like it's a really big deal. Is this a really big deal? I think it's a really big deal. And you go to someone who's there, they're like, you know what? It really wasn't that. Like, I get why it feels like that was a really big deal. It really isn't. And here's why we believe that. And here's what we've done about it anyway. But I don't know that we have a level set for expectations of what we should expect for SEL and behavior as parents, which can lead us to be under-involved or overreactive. Like there's a wide spectrum of that.
May I ask a couple of for instances, like do we have a plan in this situation? If a student has, or a classroom has a paraprofessional, an ESP assigned to them, and that para is out for the day, what is the plan?
Typically, we try to find a sub. So that might be getting someone from pulling someone from a different set of services that are less pressing, if that's needed. It might be we get fingers crossed, we get a sub on the sub list who comes in, but we try to staff those absences as we can.
So it's not impossible that the student may just become less well-serviced that day.
It's not impossible, no.
Is there a point at which we can say that unfortunately we're not able to best serve a student's needs at our schools?
Yeah, and that typically would come through a team meeting. So we have both a legal and I would argue a moral obligation to try to exhaust our own resources to serve students, every student who comes into our schools. If it gets to a point where we are not able to do that, then we would go typically through a team process to determine placement. But there are a number of steps, again, all confidential steps, that would need to be taken before that. It's not like, someone joins on Tuesday and on Thursday we're making that decision. It's a process. It takes time. It takes data collection, and it takes we need to make sure that we're doing our due diligence as a school and as a district first.
There are also extremely few other options, just to be particularly at certain age levels. So there's almost no options under the age of 9 in the valley, other than for certain types of populations. So local districts build their own. We have placed in other public districts that have programs. We have accepted students from other districts tuitioned into ours, the Step Down at Smith program, where they didn't have a program, but we built one. So there's that too. We have to really, think about, is there anything else out there? And sometimes the answer is no. So.
Okay. A question I've frequently gotten, and I know it's late, so if you guys want me to stop, tell me. For school choice students who either come with an IEP that requires a paraprofessional, or we determine they need one and we go through all the work of getting that approved by their home district.
We don't get that approved by their home district.
Okay. So if we determined after they get here that they need additional support,
Mhm.
what is the reimbursement for that like? Do we get, if we have to pay X number of dollars for that, does that come in from that district in a 100% amount the following year? Or
In a one-to-one. So the state sets allocations in their own algorithm for school choice claiming. It's actually what I'm doing this week, is because it's due on the 10th. And so it sets its own costs related to every service. So, student has 1 time a week speech. I put that in school choice claiming. We get the state algorithm reimbursement from that. Sometimes it's in our benefits, sometimes it's a little bit different. And so we do get a higher reimbursement through the school choice claiming than just a traditional school choice placement. But it's not one-to-one. Like I said, sometimes because it's a state rate, sometimes it is in our benefit, depending on, where that professional is on the scale, whatnot. Sometimes it may not be.
Collectively, looking at it from a budgetary sense, though, it typically is those tuition dollars that have helped us have the volume of service needs in the budget available to have a lot of things on staff, and the cost for having professionals on staff versus if we did not need quite the number of services and did not have that offsetting tuition, we would in more occasions, we would be having to contract out for that. And the premium on that is phenomenally
Ridiculous.
high.
Yeah.
Like a 300% maybe?
Yeah, at least.
At
Yep.
least.
Depending
So-
on which one. but
Depending
yeah.
on what it is. So sometimes we might not get exactly the dollar back, or we might get a little more, we might get a little less. But frequently the difference in those budgets are what let us have our own local students' needs met too.
And to your answer on when it comes, so we get it the next year. So
Yeah.
like I'm claiming right now for this school year, we put in the final claim, we put in our initial claims now by May 10th. And then at the end of the year, we certify in case something changed a little bit. And then that's how we get that funding next year.
While we're on that subject, can I dispose another myth, which is we just are like this mecca to take in high needs. And you can look at the financial data, and the tuition dollars for our local students going out is higher than the students coming in, which means that we aren't getting a disproportionately high number of kids with needs than our local kids.
Mhm.
So that is just a little rumor that it comes through regularly that isn't true.
in that thread, a similar question that popped up is, so last year we changed our policy to accept school choice throughout the year. Does that create a heavy burden on our school to accept students mid-year?
It can. We don't know who comes, right? So
Right.
we have X amount of open seats, and whomever comes. And so it can, but it also might not.
In your estimations, is it worth it to have that policy extended beyond a traditional school choice deadline? And you may not
I
all
think
agree,
there are
but
plenty of pros and cons. Like right now, I'm doing the school choice claiming. I will be claiming more things than I would have if we didn't open it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
But in some ways, we've had to spend that this year in an unplanned way.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of students that came in right after Christmas vacation were pretty large. And overall, we've only had one currently that is, we're working on some plans for. The others have not. They've not been, we've not needed any other additional adult support.
Okay.
So,
that's good to know.
but it's also still tricky because, again, you're thinking about entering a classroom community in which it's well established. At the same time, though, we have amazing teachers who are doing an awesome job at being able to assign models and here, this is your buddy student, just like, I mean, so it does work that we can have students come in mid-year and acclimate to a classroom community because it's different, but similar in as far as how it's run. And then is that opportunity or option sometimes where it's a bit of a change and it's something that we are still in the process of supporting.
And I think,
Go ahead.
I think a lot of the kiddos that we've brought in throughout what would have been our deadline, we're still kind of dealing with that post-COVID, were homeschooled in some way and looking to come back, or it's not working wherever they are, and it's an option. So I think it'll be interesting to maybe survey that group of folks to learn more about why they came mid-year, why they wanted to come mid-year.
And to be clear, we also had new local students come in mid-year.
Oh yeah, we had a bunch of
So-
kids
and-
move in, yep.
And those we take no matter when they come.
Yep, yep.
No matter what.
So I mean, I think kids come in all shapes and sizes, so there's all sorts of, that just is what it is.
I mean, and ultimately, the reason why a lot of the families that have come school choice specifically mid-year were because they were dissatisfied where they were and heard nothing but positive things about our school and our district and our teachers. So that's a huge draw. I mean, we're clearly doing things right in some people's eyes because they're saying, hey, Hatfield's an amazing place to be. You should come here. And parents are touring and then choosing to come here.
To get back to Adam's question about that policy, I think it's certainly worth considering, especially given if we are shifting our deadlines of when we make the call, when we vote on slots, when we have those times open. I think one of the challenges we found at the end of last year, and we talked about this in the budget presentation, is that we had 40 applicants. We had all the students that we needed for school choice to have a sustainable budget for going forward. We had those applicants. We were not able to provide them with a guarantee before they needed to make a decision. So I think by it's worth considering that if we have revised those deadlines when we let them know, when they need to let us know, if we have done that effectively, then we may not be in a position where we need to say, we're gonna open for a longer duration. We did that this year, and we got a lot of new students this year. We've revised when our practice in telling students when they have a slot and when we expect them to tell us by, and we have 21 who have committed for next year already, and so that's a change. That's a shift in our policy that I think gives a little more certainty to those numbers and gives a little more certainty to those families. So it may be that as we are changing those practices, that we can relook at some of the others too, and it may be worth considering.
I think now too is a good time to go back and revisit that because we've done it and then get back from the teachers that have now, maybe
So-
another survey that have lived it.
I also
For
just
the
want to
year
say,
of
we
how
have
that went.
another policy. I'm just going to cut some of this a little short. I'm sorry. We have another policy that will be coming up that is going to re-examine those dates. And so we're probably that's probably on next month's agenda. So there's going to be time for this conversation to have more depth. I think this is a really important conversation. And so we've extended it because it's important for us to have. I think it's important for the transparency that we've had questions coming in, and this is a chance for you guys to have input and give some feedback. I think it's incredibly helpful for existing families to hear about what the perception is beyond our town borders and why we're seeing 21 acceptances come in quickly overnight, right? That amazing quick turnaround because there's a lot that's going on that's right. And so tonight has been a good opportunity for you guys to get to speak to that in ways that I don't think everyone has had a chance to hear. And sometimes we know stuff that we don't, we don't have a way to share that because it doesn't come up in a meeting. And so tonight, it's been, and I'm hoping that the SEL conversation continues because it's part of what makes us shine. So I'm really thankful for that. I do know that we have more on our agenda, and I don't want to forgo that. And anyone that felt like they were ready to go, if they wanted to sneak out, we would totally understand. So everybody had a chance to read administrative reports. Is there anything you want to bring up off of those reports and discuss?
Thanks, Kim.
What about Connor's
Taking them
two
all at
items?
once?
I'm going to give him a chance.
Okay.
Or not. I think it might be worthwhile, Dr. Driscoll, as I think it was in your Smith Academy report, to speak to safety practices in the building.
Sure.
If you want to. Here, I'll even share the printed version if you need it.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to pull it up. So as I mentioned in my report, we've had recent inquiries about the safety of our schools and practices to ensure how we ensure that margin of safety is maintained for all of our students. So we, when we have events, it's always a balance. You want your schools to be open to the community. You want people to feel welcome to come in to celebrate our sporting events, to come see our band concerts, to come take part in that. And you also want to make sure that your schools are secure. So we, when visitors come during the school day, we ask them to check in. We've kind of revised our practice to make sure that during those kinds of events, there's someone going out to welcome people in and ask them to check in. We've changed practice so that all of our contractors do any work, they come through the front office. So, even if we know that Cody's coming to work on the HVAC system, they come in, they go through that protocol. We practice fire drills, shelter in place drills, lockdown drills. And when we have acute situations, we'll make sure that we're consulting with Hatfield PD, putting safety plans in place for any students who may need those, and to ensure that margin of safety. Those are individual plans, and those are not publicly shared. If I had a concern about Connor Driscoll and needed a safety plan to help ensure that he was being safe at school, that plan wouldn't go out publicly. That would go to Connor Driscoll's parents and guardians to know that those steps were being taken.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else the committee would like to pull off of those reports? Okay, can we there's 2 line items under the superintendent report. Let's make sure that we discuss those quickly. One, I think we have on here twice, is to update on the 6th grade move. So I guess I want to make sure that I publicly on camera say I am terribly sorry that our last meeting on the 22nd of April was not recorded. There was no intention to have that unrecorded. It was scheduled to be here. We just had a snafu in scheduling for our town YouTube channel to also be here. This is not a facility that lets us record through Zoom. The building doesn't really support that. And as a result, it was a conversation that people couldn't participate in or listen in on. And I'm sorry for that. And so we've sent out a letter. We've made that publicly. The outcome of that meeting went out. But I think the part that maybe wasn't as clear as we wish it had been is that there's a lot of appreciation for the time and the investment that went in from many, many staff members to bring that conversation forward, and that none of it was in vain, because it's a conversation that will continue and we will pick up in the fall. And so the conversation and the vote about moving 6th grade was that we would come back and continue to discuss that. So is there anything you want to update in that?
No, except to again thank everyone for the work that they did leading up to it. I know there's a lot that went into it, and that I look forward to working with the committee to continue the conversation and yeah.
So there is a place here to talk about, we've had this conversation in bits and pieces, but a quick look at school choice enrollment update for 24-25. So the committee has a sheet where predicted enrollment was going to be the in-town existing, the current school committee, or excuse me, the current school choice numbers, the approved number of slots from the meeting a month ago, and then the yes column speaks to if they've applied and they've already responded positively. Doesn't mean that there aren't other applications that just may not have come back in yet.
And we continue to reach out to those folks.
Yep.
Any questions?
Dr. Driscoll, I had emailed you earlier today and asked about, based on census data, who's eligible for kindergarten and preschool and this year and the upcoming year, couple of years. The number you gave me for next year for kindergarten doesn't match the number here. You had said there were, I think,
There were 25
25 or 27.
potential kindergartners, local kindergartners.
So that number's not on this document, but I'm just wondering if we can double check that number.
We can absolutely double check
Okay.
that number.
And how many letters went out to like potential kindergarten families? And do we need to reach out to them again?
We do have our welcome pre-K event this Thursday behind the library that we partner with the collaborative. And last year, that was when we were able to pick up a couple stragglers.
Awesome.
So we'll make sure that we have enrollment packets and things there. So that's an annual event that we do. And last year, we definitely picked up a couple that hadn't quite made it all over. They're like, hey, who are you? And are you on our list?
Excellent. Okay. I dare say you guys feel like you've heard from the budget subcommittee sufficiently tonight. I'm going to take all those smiles to mean Mr. Sullivan is off the hook for giving a report unless there's anything you want to add.
I think they've heard enough from me tonight regardless.
Okay. There is one piece of financial business that we must attend to, and that is the busing bid review for FY25. So as you will remember, back to, I don't know, November or December, when we went through and put the bus bid out, and we made sure that we had it in before the budgeting season started, and we got one bid in. And so we need to take a look at that tonight. Did you bring that?
I forgot it.
Okay.
I left it on my desk, ready to go, right in the folder.
Is there anything different about it?
Nothing has changed.
Nothing's changed
no.
except for the amount is 43% more than it was a year ago.
Well, not since we had the review of the bid and everything.
We had a review of the bid in
In the subcommittee.
subcommittee, but we didn't bring it to the committee until we brought it with the full budget. So at some point, we need to approve that bid if we're going to approve it, and that's the subcommittee doesn't do that, the full committee needs to.
And the full committee never got the proposed contract.
We were
I thought we
going to
did.
look at, I thought we were going to look at it tonight.
Oh, I thought at some point we had it before.
We know the total of it.
And it was a 43% increase.
Yes, ma'am.
I really thought we had it somewhere.
I don't think I don't think I have an electronic copy of it.
I mean, I
it's
could pull up
just-
in the budget
Yes,
to
but
get
I
the
don't think
numbers.
The actual
Right.
paperwork exists except for the hard copy.
Oh, I thought,
I think I have a PDF of it. I can send to
Do you?
everyone. Yeah, I think so.
Of the new one?
I think so.
I don't remember having that. Could you
I
please?
think perhaps because I asked Dr. Driscoll for it. What's the
Excellent.
shortcut for emailing school committee? Is it just SC?
Yes.
Hey, look at that.
So is it going to get mailed or just put
It's
in the
going to be
shared
in your
drive?
inbox in a second, I think.
Right,
God
so I have
willing.
to go into-
Thank you, Adam.
Welcome.
Yay, Adam.
Oh, team.
What was that?
I said, go team.
I know, I was
Oh.
like trying to remember the acronym from the SEL.
Oh, yeah.
Together,
everyone achieves
achieves
more.
more.
It's in.
Yep.
I got it.
Okay, here's
I
the
don't
bus
have it
contract.
yet.
Oh, right. It wouldn't be in my inbox because I sent it. No, it should be.
I got it. I
Excellent.
got it.
Yep.
In your email.
It's in your email.
I'm looking at my email. I have a really slow connection.
Here, do you want to look on? Did you get it?
It's still spinning.
Here, look with me.
Oh, like I can see that far?
Well, I'll move it. I'll zoom it in.
Dare I ask about how many kids do we have that ride the bus?
Connor, you have confidential information up.
Oh my goodness.
So
Share my computer.
It was, sorry.
share, make sure Zoom is no longer
Yeah,
sharing.
no, Zoom's not.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, but it's on those things.
Sorry, yeah, I just,
Thanks.
All right, so
We weren't looking at that either.
the good stuff is
Page 3.
page 3.
Do you know about how many kids ride the bus?
Not enough. I mean, at the elementary school, there's more. There's
Yeah.
those buses are pretty full. In the probably 20s to 30s on each. At the high school, we have one bus that I think 9 kids come off, and one bus that 6 kids come off.
Can't we combine the route or?
No.
Yeah, we
Hmm.
we have eligible to ride the bus. We have a lot of students, so we have 2 full buses if every student who's eligible rode the bus.
There is
Um,
potentially a path to appeal to the state to be relieved of the rule, but that is not something we can achieve before
Yeah.
we need to have a bus.
Hmm.
Is it worth an email to our state representatives to have to encourage a statewide review of bus contracts?
Oh, I had a meeting last week with Representative Sabadoza about that very subject.
Because I know we're not alone. in
No, we're
this,
not.
and
I collected information from districts statewide, and we are right in the mix with everyone across the state. Even the more populous areas are seeing oftentimes just one bid with astronomical increases.
same with special ed transportation. We've been advocating with Russ, and now Russ is in charge of everything at DESI, but
Yeah.
it's just amazing that like a very short run in town even can be several $100s a day.
Yep.
So
The perception that bus companies are working together to,
Yeah,
Create
there's a
this-
perception of collusion. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We don't have any proof.
There's no proof.
but it's the
but-
perception. That's why I
Yeah.
said it.
there's also a
There-
driver shortage.
Yeah,
They're having
there's-
to increase their driver pay, their gas
Yep.
costs.
Yeah, their costs are going up
Their
too.
costs are going up too, but it is, there's no, at least for special education, there's no control over it. They can set their own rate, and sometimes they do it based on the complexity of students, on families, on mileage, on all sorts of different factors.
feels like a spot ripe for regulation. It's
Yeah.
like some states are
Mhm.
looking at regulating ambulance costs
Mhm.
because the costs can be, exploitative. Same thing here.
And it's, even on singular runs, it's not the same bid process, but I do reach out to multiple companies every time, and often don't hear back. Or if I hear back, it's in 2 different ways, and I negotiate it down, I go back and forth, and I don't sometimes know why they finally say yes to whatever I cut them down to, but it's incredible.
Just for fun, do we still have a position for a driver posted?
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
And we partnered, sorry, to go off script a little bit. We partnered with Northampton recently and leased one of our vans for a few days, which we've talked about doing. There was one day where I pulled in and all 3 vans weren't in our parking lot. Smith Academy was using it for a honor society or field trip thing, and then Northampton had leased one for the day, and we were using ours. And so the transportation, there's a whole person who's transportation in Northampton, and she's setting up her own 7D training thing, so it'll be more local because the person we've been using is the other side of the state. So she knows that we have vans. She knows that we need drivers. So hopefully a continued partnership with Northampton will be fruitful on that 7D van world, because it is, as much as that, it's the same exact thing for these little runs. The percentage increases are astronomical.
One of the avenues that may be worth pursuing down the line, I don't know if it's worth pursuing it right now, is that there are incentives, grant incentives for districts to bring things in-house, specifically around purchasing electric buses. If we were able to find our own drivers, there could be grant incentives to get our own buses to keep in-house.
I worry that we end up like Provincetown.
Yep.
We have our own buses.
That's where I was going next.
Okay.
The
Well, that's
challenge
where
with
we're
that,
at with vans.
Yeah.
well,
We've got 3 vans, 1 driver.
and the challenge with that is that they had their own bus and their own driver. They lost their driver, and then they had to contract out, and they saw increases of 140 something %. And
Punitive.
had a bus.
And they had a bus sit there.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
So that's
Which they could have leased to the company they paid 140% more to.
Yep.
So I say we did look at alternatives. We've had long conversations. If there's what we can do, we've taken the actions we can take. It could be worse, is the fear.
I'll make a motion to accept the bus contract as presented.
Okay. Is there a second?
Reluctantly.
A reluctant second. Okay. All in favor of approving the Gribco bus con bid as presented, say aye.
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 Any opposed? And it passes. Next up, we have a reading. I will turn it over to Kathy to talk about the JID student cell phones and portable electronic devices policy. And I believe you have a copy of this just as a handy reference.
Yeah.
And smartwatches was the edit.
This is technically the first reading of this.
Yeah,
because
this
we
is-
didn't get
this
to
is-
we didn't have time to converse about it last time.
And this is essentially a draft because we don't have a policy that we're amending. Becca highlighted smartwatches, not knowing if we should include those or not.
Yes.
Maybe at the elementary level, but it's there highlighted to spark a conversation around that. Or to just leave it as cell phones and personal electronic equipment. Because we also don't know what else.
what's coming up next.
What's going to be the next thing. This policy was pulled mainly from South Hadley, correct, Connor?
Yes.
We looked at several other surrounding towns that did have it. Not everybody does. Some were much more restrictive, where students walked into the building and the phone immediately went into a locked zippered bag and stored for the day, and they have to pick it up at the end of the day. This is proposing that students would shut off the phones and keep it in their backpacks or wherever, and we're not taking it from them unless it's become a problem and it needs to be removed and it's been a disturbance. This policy does not outline specific discipline. We didn't feel like going to that level yet because we'd like to hope our students would respect not using their phones because of this policy. There was a conversation about, cell phones are so much a part of everybody's lives. Is this a reasonable request? And my personal argument would be that we're setting students up for expectations in the future. If they go to a job or they're working wherever, they need to know they don't need to be attached to the phone for their work shift. If it's 4 hours, if it's 6 hours. And right now, school is kind of their work shift. They're there to learn and be present in the classroom. We've also talked about the equity issue of this. Not everybody has a phone. It may seem like everybody has a phone, but there are instances that in certain grades, not everybody does. And so if a teacher requests, yes, you can use your smartphones for this, or pull out your phone and look up this or do that, and there's even one student in the classroom who does not have a phone for whatever reason, it's an equity issue.
We also have one-to-one devices.
And we do.
So
They
that's,
have a way to look things up.
We are not preventing anybody from looking anything up. They have other alternatives.
So I guess the one piece of feedback I heard thus far, because we did put it out for staff to take a look at, and we heard back from our art teacher who they regularly use things for photography because your cell phone picture versus your Chromebook picture is a mile apart. And so there may be an equity solution for that. But if there's someone who regularly uses the device or specifically uses the device, are we giving classroom teachers, and the equity issue is a piece of it, maybe we don't give anybody an issue, like if it's just the thing, or is there a way to craft some language that gives classroom teachers some opportunity if it's specific to the need of their class that a Chromebook won't handle?
It's worth discussing, but one of the things that spurred this to the subcommittee was that there was inconsistencies amongst classrooms or teachers of, oh, this teacher doesn't mind if you have it, this teacher does. And the hope was that a policy would make everything level. And so while I understand what you're saying, if we have allowances here or there, it's just it could fall right back into what it currently is instead of having a policy that is for everyone. I haven't thought specifically about the art class solution, but it could be that there is a camera that is purchased for that purpose, that for all the art classes, for any of the students to use rather than individual students using their phones. I don't know. But
Have a donation of old phones just used for that.
yeah, anything,
There are ways to solve it. I agree.
Mhm.
I'm just raising it so we talk about it at a first reading.
One of the biggest things for the first reading was, are we going in the right direction? And do we want this policy?
What's the feedback from administration?
I haven't got much feedback from teachers, but I would say yes. The feedback I have got is,
I mean, we could we could do more specific things for the elementary school versus the middle school versus the high school.
Well,
If that is a direction that you would like to see.
I'm not hearing that.
I feel like the policy should probably be universal.
Okay.
Like
Mhm.
there's a policy, and then within our handbooks, if there's if there's any differences, we can kind of articulate them there. But I think I think we've seen the need for something like this increase.
Okay.
We don't deny students the ability to make a phone call home to a parent, they need something.
Yeah.
But we also have gotten parents phoning us because their kid's texting them from when they've gone to their locker about something because they're upset about something. It's like, no, that's not how that works.
Well, it's not helping anybody.
No,
No.
correct.
Or parents that call in to say, are you staying after for practice today? In the middle of the day. Or they could call the office and say, is there practice?
In the vein of avoiding a power struggle and additional behaviors related to this, would it make sense to like explain that a confiscation process is in the handbook or something? I'm just, in thinking about, when kids are asked to put it away, that has been a moment where we've had behaviors. So I'm not sure.
I see a lot of upside to universal standard. I mean, I've heard too, it's like, oh, that teacher's okay with it and this one's not. It's like, that puts the teacher who's not in a no-win spot, it puts a lot, I don't know. It makes me think of kids who get to play their parents off each other. It's just not a fun spot.
I was wondering too if we needed to put, I mean, the art teacher wouldn't like it very much, but if we needed to put something in the policy about that teachers should not be having students use their devices for class assignments or because everyone has an individual device.
Well, hopefully if
There
the
is no
policy
power.
is saying that the phones are supposed to be off and stowed away.
I know, but
And
our
the teacher
teachers,
isn't
but our
following.
teacher's gonna think, well, that doesn't apply if I tell the whole class, take out your phones to
I think
take a
it's up to
photograph?
administration then to hold teachers to follow a policy that is for the district.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think we need to call out teachers in a policy to follow the policy.
Yeah, I mean it's a district policy. It's up to us to enforce the policy.
I mean,
Well, would need to be, I mean, I assume administration would explain, like, this means we're not going to use
Phones,
devices in class except for what's assigned,
if this,
assigned
Reach.
device.
all the readings and is approved, I would ask at the beginning of the school year,
Mhm.
when you have your opening days, that all the teachers are informed, there is a new policy, and this is what it is.
And students and parents,
Yes,
Yeah.
everyone.
but
Yeah.
teachers, students,
Could be like
parents.
headline news in
Yeah.
the Falcon Flyer.
That's right.
There's a new.
Are we seeing anything other than cell phones and smartwatches? Men?
No, I mean earbuds. But if cell phones and smartwatches are turned off and stood, they shouldn't be.
What would the
Connect
earbuds
from in
would
the
be
locker.
different?
Yeah.
I think earbuds could fall under
I was going to ask
personal.
iPads. What about?
Yeah, we haven't seen many tablets at the high school, but maybe
There's a few at the elementary school.
So personal electronic equipment would definitely cover gaming
Mhm.
and
And
tablets
Yep.
and earbuds.
Oh, like,
Electronic devices.
I like the direction of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I do too.
The only question I have is around and maybe I'm just trying to sort it out, like the definition of a smartwatch, that means that there's a difference between a smartwatch and like a fitness tracker or a
Right.
digital watch.
My Fitbit is not in any way, shape, or form a
Smart.
smartwatch.
Okay.
I don't have phone calls or text messages or anything that goes through this.
We might
like-
need to define what constitutes smart.
Well, I'm wondering,
able
Yeah,
to
I
receive
just don't.
communication, able to play.
And it gets tricky
Yeah.
because like the basic Fitbit does not, but the higher end Fitbit will
Yeah,
connect to your
mine's
phone
really
and
old.
transfer you. So like
Mm.
now we're asking
are you s-
faculty to check people's wrists every day to find out what.
Right. Well, and are you saying that they can't, can they not wear a smartwatch, or they can't be using smartwatch features?
The part of why I asked that is it's pretty common now in the younger grades that students who are toilet training have smart things that vibrate to remind them to use the restroom. We have multiple students that are using that as a strategy. So
And there is that clause in here,
yeah, some are, these are
Sorry.
not all students on plans
know,
for
it's
medical
just-
reasons. It's
it
just a
says individual
strategy.
cases for reasons of medical necessity or other serious needs exceptions
There you go.
may be granted by school administration.
Yep.
And that would absolutely fit into that.
Yep, yep.
As we talked about in subcommittee, that there are students who are diabetic and have
Mhm.
the need for that.
Yep.
And we totally get that. And
Yep.
we just don't want the student that's,
And even that
scrolling
student
their
needs
social
to only
media
be
or
on that
texting
app.
or,
Mhm.
So I dare offer this one. Becca's not here, but this might be lovely if you guys, when you go back and are continuing to work on things, to have like a clearly permitted bullet list and a clearly not permitted, like just so there is zero confusion, just to kind of make sure that all of that got captured clearly and headline it.
With a caveat of this may not be an exhaustive list, just
Right,
things change.
right. So it's like permitted before school, after
well,
school.
as we know,
da-da-da.
Becca loves making
Yes,
her
tables.
charts and
Tables are big.
She
I
loves
think
those.
I feel like this calls for a table. I'm just going to say it.
Yeah.
And she'll get to do that.
Can I just ask one of the things that, in speaking to Ms. Lanaville, it says in one of the paragraphs, students are permitted to use cell phones before and after school hours, outside or inside the school building.
With the approval of the director
Okay,
of the
'cause
program.
I'm just going to say that is not going to be something that we want to support. We want kids not to be using them before school or during box or after school for that same reason as.
Students are permitted to use cell phones at after-school or sports activities only with the permission of the coach, instructor, or program director.
So how is that different from the teacher can say it's okay and this teacher can't? Just devil's advocate here.
It's extracurricular.
It's extracurricular. It's not during the school day.
Okay.
And, for sports, you need to be able to say practice is done early or we're running
Yeah,
late or the game
And
is.
at that point, the office is often closed.
Yeah.
That's the difference for me, is that during the school day, kid needs to call home. They can come down to the office, call home. After school at a game or a practice, if the office is closed, they can't get in. They may still need to communicate.
So us old gray-haired folks used to have a payphone
Mhm.
at SA anyway. Is there any viable alternative to that at this point? That would be public, that any student could use after hours and have access to.
Doesn't exist.
I don't think so.
There's just not a thing anymore,
No.
right? Yeah, all right.
Hasn't been for a long time.
Yeah.
Even before kids had cell phones, it wasn't a thing. We went through a period of time where kids didn't routinely have access to cell phones, but there weren't any more payphones either.
Oh, okay.
So there was this gap
a-
there.
I don't know what
Window.
time. I
Bring
don't
back
remember what year the
payphone.
phone left.
I had those at my high school too. Remember?
Is there any conversation with the group that supported wait till 8th come back around? Because that was a big deal for a while.
It was a huge deal for a long time.
And that seems to have
I've-
ebbed away.
I feel like as we get more and more information about phones and stuff, we're learning that it's healthy for adults.
Anyone?
So
Mhm.
why stop at 8th grade? No offense, 9th through 12th graders.
No. But I'm just saying in general, like this, bringing this policy up, I don't know which group. There was a group that supported
was.
that.
There was.
Whether
It was
there
a
was
parent-led
part of
group.
I thought Nurse Jean was maybe in the middle. Like
She may have been part of it.
there was.
It was brought forward by a particular parent, and she was pushing for it for a long time and then got more traction on it.
Okay.
And Nurse Jean, I believe
It-
joined.
Because I came in kind of midstream with that, all right, kind of toward the tail end, and the understanding that I had is, as it was kind of petering out, was there was some feedback from parents and community members that felt that the schools were overstepping and trying to dictate how they, what they were deciding as
But it-
parents for their kids.
What I recall, though, is that the school didn't clearly take a position on it, and that's what affected the parent involvement
Okay,
that was pushing for it, because the school wouldn't totally get behind them and say yes,
got it.
because the school was trying to remain more neutral on it, but,
That makes sense.
didn't discourage the parent group from promoting it.
I see a question in the audience.
Yes,
Can I give some insight on that?
yes.
Please.
All right,
Well,
so-
actually, wait, none of you can say yes. We would love to hear from you in this unofficial one-time capacity.
All right, thank you. So I was a parent of that class that pushed for that when my child was in 5th or 6th grade, and I teach middle school over at Smith Academy. We were never told about that policy as being anything that the school district was doing. And the only reason I knew about it was my child was in 6th grade or 5th grade at the time where that was taking place. So it was kind of a good intention, but not the follow-through component to that weight to 8.
As
So-
I said, it was parent-led. The
Right,
school didn't,
but it
take a
was, it was
position.
presented by the elementary school as a district-wide thing, and then the middle school was never told of it. So that's kind of.
well, it was
An
elementary
elementary
parents
Right,
that were promoting it and trying to do more with it. On their own, they could only get so far without school joining forces. And at the time, the administration did not want to join forces in that and make that kind of statement.
So would you like more feedback, or you feel like you've got stuff to go on?
I got stuff to go on, but we're always happy to take more feedback on this.
Okay.
We think it's important. We'd like to get it right. And,
I think this is definitely one that will come back 3 times, because at some point
well, because
If
it's
the-
new as well.
yeah, and parents may have some feelings, and let's hear it.
Mhm.
But it sounds like there's widespread.
Can,
As a teacher, do you have a perspective?
I've been typing an email.
Okay,
I saw him
We'll look
nodding a few
forward.
times, so based on
We'll
when he
look-
was nodding.
the body language was like, yes.
So I've spent years promoting and hoping that kids would use cell phones appropriately. I've had classes where they've done amazing jobs, where a kid would take a picture of the notes on the board and airdrop it to everybody else. And it was absolutely amazing, and I loved it. I would hope the school committee investigates bags. The magnet, seal them away. Telling kids to have them off in their locker is going to increase bathroom trips, where kids stop at their lockers to text home.
But it says they're not supposed to use it then, or at lunch.
There's no specific hall monitor to
Right.
make sure that they're not doing it. I know Chicopee has bags. The state supposedly has grants for bags.
I think Wacona has bags.
I think that's the difference, like that, we should have some provision of where they can be put to avoid confiscation. That power control piece of confiscation is tricky.
Yeah.
So.
Even the word feels harsh.
And so I don't know if, when we do safety plans and behavior plans, we say, the kid will do this, the family will do this, the school will do this. So I know, like, we can't put in policy all that, but I wonder if just that somehow the school will provide something to get this implemented, in terms of bags or a place or whatever. But I know we have the secured spot once it's been confiscated, but ahead of that.
So you guys might have to come back and give us an education on how the bags are working.
Yeah.
And how effective they've been, and what other.
We did briefly talk about it in subcommittee about this, or a box or something to that effect. And Connor, I believe it was you that wanted to have a measure of trust in our students.
yeah, We may need the bags.
We may need that.
Well,
Yeah.
it sounds like a conversation with some districts who've tried multiple
Yeah.
things and
Yeah.
see, let's learn
Yeah.
from them.
Maybe a difference of grade level, like age level, because, we deal with it. I mean, I see that we deal with it at the elementary school, and we obviously deal with it at Smith. So, I don't know if bags or some other system worked better with younger kids versus older kids versus whatever, but
Just out of
Giant magnet.
curiosity, what percentage of kids at the elementary school would you say have cell phones or smartwatches that they're bringing to school?
almost
a
all
guess.
of fourth, fifth, and sixth, and bunches of downstairs all the way to kindergarten.
I might have told my child that there is a wait until 8th rule and that you cannot in Hatfield have a cell phone before 8th grade.
Let them watch these meeting minutes.
I tried that too. And
I'm telling you, I'm saying it. But no, I hear like, well, but such and such has. I'm like, you guys are, at the time they were 7. I was like, 7-year-olds with cell phones. I know a 4-year-old with one.
Yeah.
It's rough. Okay.
So thank you for the feedback. If you have further thoughts, please feel free to email about them. Happy to hear more opinions and suggestions as we continue to look at it.
Thank you.
But we just wanted to be sure that this was a direction that looked good to people, and now we can tweak it. So thank you. Thank you.
So I feel like, Ms. Maloney, we got our money out of you for your last meeting to run until 10:15. Would anyone like to make a motion to
Can I ask a
adjourn?
question quick?
Sure.
I have floating on my calendar that we're holding next week. Are we?
Do not believe we're going to need a meeting next week.
Okay.
So a couple of us have a prep meeting tomorrow. If I learn something that changes that, I will reach out, but I don't believe we'll need to.
Okay.
I would hope that everyone would join together and come to town meeting. 14.
Do we have babysitters available yet?
We put the
I
plug
saw
out.
the
I'll
notice go
plug
out.
it out again. We haven't had any respondents yet, but that doesn't mean they're not there.
Okay.
Okay.
Oftentimes they wait till their parents encourage them to.
Some voluntold.
Mhm.
We need some voluntolding.
Yep.
Mm. All right.
Okay. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second?
Oh, excellent. Last act. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for the late night.